The Snap. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thanos believed the universe was heading toward collapse due to overpopulation and scarce resources. To solve this, he set out to collect all 6 Infinity Stones, immensely powerful gems that, when combined in a special glove called the Infinity Gauntlet, could bend reality itself. Despite being opposed by Earth's mightiest heroes, he succeeded. With a single snap of his fingers, Thanos wiped out half of all living beings in the universe. The effects were immediate and indiscriminate. Half of all living beings, regardless of species or form, simply crumbled to ash within moments of the snap. On Earth alone, nearly 3.8 billion people were killed, with estimated deaths across the entire universe reaching around 53 quadrillion lives. In the 5 years that followed, those who disappeared came to be known as the Vanished, and cities around the world built memorial walls in their honor to commemorate the dead. The collapse of law and order in the aftermath created a power vacuum that criminal figures like Wilson Fisk exploited to grow their operations. Not everyone accepted this, however. Clint Barton, a hero who survived the snap, channeled his grief into a brutal vigilante crusade under the alias of Ronin, targeting criminal organizations around the world, including cartels, the Yakuza, and street gangs. 5 years later, the Avengers managed to undo the snap and bring back everyone who had vanished. But rather than a clean, happy ending, the sudden return of billions of people created its own crisis. Survivors had spent years grieving and rebuilding their lives, and the return of the dead was as disorienting as the loss had been. The Great Purification. In the Halo universe, the Forerunners were an ancient, extraordinarily advanced civilization that once ruled millions of worlds across the galaxy. Their downfall came through war with the Flood, a devastating parasite that spreads by consuming intelligent life. Unable to stop the Flood by any other means, the Forerunners made a last resort decision. In 97,445 BCE, they fired the Halo Array, a network of 7 massive ring-shaped superweapons, in an event known as the Great Purification. The firing wiped out all potential Flood hosts across the galaxy, effectively starving the parasite out, but at the cost of nearly all complex life in the Milky Way. Centuries later, in 2332, human scientists noticed a strange gap in the fossil record. No remains from around 97,000 BCE could be found on any world humans had colonized. Initially written off as a fluke called the Ross-Ziegler blip, it wasn't until humanity discovered the Halo rings that the mystery was solved. The gap in the fossil record was the fingerprint of the Great Purification. Reaper harvests. In the Mass Effect universe, Reapers are colossal machine starships that are essentially the melded minds of billions of organic beings fused into immortal mechanical bodies. Their origin traces back to an ancient and dominant species called the Leviathans, who created an artificial intelligence tasked with solving a recurring problem. Organic life always created synthetic life, which would eventually wipe them out. The artificial intelligence found its own solution. It turned on the Leviathans, wiping out most of them and transforming them into the very first Reaper, Harbinger. The Reapers were operating on the logic that every sufficiently advanced civilization will eventually create synthetic life, and that synthetic life will destroy its creators. And so, to prevent organics from being permanently wiped out, the Reapers intervene in the galaxy on a regular cycle by harvesting advanced civilizations, by absorbing them into new Reapers before they can be destroyed by their own creations. This clears the way for younger, more primitive species to rise and develop without competition. In the Reaper's view, this endless cycle of extinction is actually an act of preservation, ensuring organic life always continues in some form. They leave nothing behind, no records, no ruins that could reveal their existence, so each new civilization rises with no warning of what is coming for them. The scale of a Reaper harvest is staggering. During their invasion of Earth alone, an estimated 1.86 million people were processed every single day. At that rate, the entire human population of the planet would be gone within a decade. The likely death toll across all cycles reaches the quadrillions. The Yuuzhan Vong War. In the Star Wars Legends continuity, the Yuuzhan Vong are a warlike, nomadic species from another galaxy who fled the destruction of their home galaxy and set their sights on conquering a new one. Fanatically religious, they believed the invasion was the will of their gods and that the galaxy was theirs by divine right. They were masters of biotechnology, using living organisms in place of machines for everything from weapons to starships, making them a wholly unfamiliar and deeply dangerous enemy. After decades of quiet scouting and preparation, they launched a full-scale invasion, rapidly overwhelming the outer edges of the galaxy. The New Republic, the governing body of the galaxy at the time, was too disorganized to mount an effective defense. Within 2 years, the Yuuzhan Vong had pushed all the way to the galactic core, conquering and transforming Coruscant, the galaxy's capital world, into a hostile jungle world. Along the way, entire species were annihilated and whole planets were left uninhabitable. 2 losses in particular defined the human cost of the war for the Solo family. Early in the conflict, during a Yuuzhan Vong attack on the planet Cernpittle, the enemy used gravity manipulation to crash the planet's moon into the surface. Han Solo, his son Anakin, and his lifelong companion Chewbacca raced to evacuate civilians aboard their ship, the Millennium Falcon. In the chaos, Chewbacca was cut off from the ship. He managed to throw Anakin to safety before the moon struck, dying as the moon collided with the planet. The loss shattered Han, who, in his grief, blamed Anakin and spiraled into a depression that severely strained his marriage to Leia. Later in the war, Anakin led a team of young Jedi on a desperate mission to infiltrate a Yuuzhan Vong world ship and eliminate a creature being used to hunt and kill Jedi. The mission succeeded, but at a terrible price. Anakin died in the effort, and his brother Jason was captured and presumed dead. The tide of the war eventually turned when the struggling New Republic united with former enemies and rivals, including the Imperial Remnant and several other major factions, to form the Galactic Alliance. Even the Mandalorians, led by Boba Fett, played a role. Though they appeared to side with the Yuuzhan Vong, it was a deception, and they ultimately fought for the defense of the galaxy. Jason Solo, who had survived his capture, dealt the final blow by killing the Yuuzhan Vong's leader, ending the conflict. The cost was almost incomprehensible. An estimated 365 trillion lives were lost, and millions more were left without homes. For Jason personally, the experience left deep marks. In the aftermath, he spent 5 years traveling the galaxy to deepen his understanding of the Force, a journey that ultimately led him to the dark side. The War in Heaven. In the universe of Warhammer 40,000, the War in Heaven was one of the oldest and most catastrophic conflicts in the history of the galaxy, fought roughly 60 million years before the 41st millennium. It was waged between 2 ancient powers, the Old Ones, a highly advanced species that had long shepherded life across the galaxy, and the Necrontyr, a humanoid alien race who, alongside their godlike allies known as the C'tan, rose up against them. The C'tan were godlike beings of pure energy as old as the universe itself, who drifted through space feeding on stars. The Old Ones were the galaxy's first great civilization, an ancient reptilian species of immense wisdom with mastery over physics, psychic power, and a network of portals that let them travel and seed life across the galaxy. The Necrontyr, by contrast, were a people defined by suffering. Their homeworld bombarded them with lethal radiation, giving them short, agonizing lives and a culture consumed by death. Despite this, they built a vast interstellar empire through dynasties ruled by a governing body called the Triarch, led by the Silent King. Deeply resentful of the immortal Old Ones and fractured by internal conflict, the Silent King chose to unite his people through war and declared the Necrontyr's collective enemy to be the Old Ones. However, the war did not go as the Silent King had anticipated. Near defeat and facing internal collapse, the Necrontyr made a desperate bargain. One of the C'tan, known as the Deceiver, approached the Silent King with an offer: unity and immortality in exchange for an alliance against the Old Ones. Despite misgivings, the Silent King accepted. The C'tan delivered on their promise through a process called biotransference, replacing every Necrontier's organic body with an immortal metal shell. But the price was their souls. As their flesh was shed, their life essence was consumed by the C'tan, leaving them as undying but hollow metal warriors, the Necrons. The Silent King, now in absolute command of his soulless people, understood too late the horror of what he had done. Regardless, the newly born Necrons joined the C'tan and threw themselves back into the war against the Old Ones with renewed and terrible force. With the Necrons united and the C'tan at full strength, the Old Ones were pushed to the brink. The C'tan and Necrons soon dominated the galaxy, harvesting younger species for energy. In desperation, the Old Ones engineered new psychic warrior species to fight back, most notably the early ancestors of the Aeldari. These psychically gifted races proved effective, as the C'tan and Necrons were both vulnerable to warp-based power, and the tide began to turn. The C'tan attempted to counter this by sealing off the material universe from the warp entirely, but the sheer scale of the war had already destabilized the psychic dimension, giving rise to the realm of chaos. This unleashed new horrors, including parasitic warp creatures called enslavers, that devastated the Old Ones' servant races. Caught between the Necron-C'tan assault and the forces of chaos, the Old Ones were ultimately destroyed. With the Old Ones gone, the Silent King turned on the C'tan. Using devastating weapons, the Necrons shattered their former gods into countless fragments called C'tan shards and sealed them away in containment devices called Tesseract labyrinths. The rebellion was costly. Millions of Necrons died, and the Triarch, the ruling body of the Necron dynasties, was almost entirely destroyed. But the Necrons were finally free of their captors. Recognizing that his people were too weakened to hold the galaxy, especially with the Aeldari rising to fill the power vacuum, the Silent King ordered the Necrons into a 60-million-year hibernation inside hidden underground vaults called Tomb Worlds. Then, consumed by guilt over what he had done to his people, he destroyed his ability to command them and exiled himself from the galaxy entirely. Noctis Aeterna. Sticking with Warhammer 40,000, at the close of the 41st millennium, a catastrophe known as the Noctis Aeterna, or simply the Blackness, engulfed the galaxy. Its defining event was the tearing open of the Great Rift, a massive rupture in reality that allowed the warp to bleed into the physical universe on a galaxy-wide scale. The resulting storms of supernatural energy split the Imperium of Man, humanity's vast interstellar civilization, clean in half, plunging countless worlds into darkness and chaos. The Great Rift severed over 1 million Imperial worlds from the Astronomicon, a psychic beacon generated from Earth that humanity's starships rely on to navigate faster-than-light travel. Without it, interstellar communication and travel collapsed, leaving every planet to face the chaos alone. The forces of chaos wasted no time. Demon armies, traitorous space marines, and chaos cults swept through the isolated systems in the wake of the storms. The crisis reached its most alarming point when the chaos god Khorne dispatched 88 legions of demons against the Imperial Palace on Earth. The attack was repelled, but the message was clear. Even humanity's most sacred and fortified world was no longer beyond reach. Across the Imperium, key industrial and military worlds found themselves under siege by chaos fleets and war machines. In the darkest moments of these battles, a mysterious force known as the Legion of the Damned appeared, spectral space marines who materialized without warning on worlds on the verge of defeat, destroying the enemy and then vanishing just as inexplicably as they had arrived. Even as the Astronomicon began to flicker back to life, it could not penetrate the Great Rift. Earth was flooded with desperate distress signals from worlds on the other side, but it could do nothing to reach them. Many planets and entire Space Marine chapters on that side of the rift were simply lost. In response, Primarch Guilliman of the Ultramarines, recently returned after millennia in stasis, launched the Indomitus Crusade, the largest military campaign humanity had undertaken in thousands of years. Leading an enormous force that included elite warriors, Space Marine chapters, and a new generation of enhanced soldiers called Primaris Marines, Guilliman fought his way across the galaxy, relieving besieged worlds and restoring order where he could. The opening of the Great Rift and the chaos that followed cost the lives of countless trillions, as the galaxy had been permanently and irrevocably changed. The Horus Heresy. Continuing to jump around the universe of Warhammer 40,000, we have the Horus Heresy in the 31st millennium, a 9-year civil war that tore humanity's interstellar empire apart from within. It began with the corruption of Primarch Horus, the emperor of mankind's most trusted son and supreme military commander. The Chaos Gods, the most malevolent entities of the warp, exploited Horus's ambition and his growing sense that the emperor had betrayed him, turning him against his father and driving him to seize the Imperium for himself. Horus was not alone. He brought half of his brothers, the Primarchs, along with their legions of Space Marines and vast portions of the Imperial military over to his side. What followed was years of devastating warfare across the galaxy as Horus drove his forces toward Earth. The war ended on Earth itself in a final catastrophic confrontation. The Emperor and Horus met in personal combat, resulting in Horus being slain, but the Emperor was left mortally wounded, leading to his being kept in a state of perpetual agonizing suspension on life support attached to the Golden Throne. The death toll was staggering, over 2.3 trillion lives lost during the war itself, rising to 4.6 trillion when accounting for the populations the Imperium purged afterward due to chaos corruption. The Heresy brought a permanent end to the Emperor's Great Crusade, his lifelong mission to reunite all of humanity under one government. What rose in its place was the Imperium of Man as it exists in the 41st millennium, a vast, grim, and paranoid civilization constantly at war. Muad'dib's Jihad. In the Dune universe, Paul Atreides rose from a fugitive to the most powerful figure in the known universe after defeating the ruling emperor in battle, destroying the forces of the ruthless House Harkonnen, and seizing control of Arrakis, the only source of the spice melons, a substance so vital that whoever controls it controls interstellar civilization. Paul then leveraged that power to take the imperial throne. He cemented his claim by marrying the Emperor's eldest daughter and then sending the Emperor into exile. Paul's Freeman followers, the desert warriors of Arrakis who viewed him as their prophesied messiah, did not stop at Arrakis. Fired by religious zeal, they spread across the galaxy in a holy war known as Muad'dib's Jihad, targeting anyone who resisted Paul's rule. With Paul controlling the spice, any opposition was effectively trapped, unable to move forces freely between star systems. The Jihad spread virtually unopposed across the known universe, pillaging thousands of worlds. Following a combination of conquest and negotiated settlements, the 12-year war would finally come to a close. The only world spared from the Jihad was Caladan, the ancestral home of House Atreides and Paul's birthplace. His mother, Lady Jessica, refused to allow Freeman forces any access to the planet whatsoever, even for religious pilgrimage. When the war finally ended after 12 years, Paul himself estimated the toll at around 61 billion dead, with 90 planets rendered biologically sterile and 500 more worlds left broken and demoralized, with 40 distinct religions completely wiped out along with all of their followers. The fall of the 12 colonies. In Battlestar Galactica, the Cylons were a race of robotic beings created by humanity as servant soldiers who eventually rebelled. In their second Great War with humanity, called both the Fall of the 12 Colonies and the Second Cylon War, their surprise attack was overwhelming and merciless. Within 24 hours, the Cylons had wiped out nearly the entire human population across the 12 colonies, over 29 billion people, through indiscriminate strikes on civilian and military targets. The Cylons then occupied the devastated worlds, repairing cities for their own habitation. Any humans who remained behind faced lethal radiation exposure, making organized resistance nearly impossible. Only a tiny fraction of humanity escaped, roughly 50,000 survivors aboard refugee ships and 2 surviving warships, the Battlestar Galactica and Pegasus. When the Cylons abandoned the colonies after 10 months, it made little difference. The planets were so irradiated that humans could never return. The survivors were left with no home to go back to, adrift in space and searching for somewhere else to call home. The 1-Year War. In the Mobile Suit Gundam universe, humanity had long since expanded into space, living in massive orbital colonies. The Earth Federation governs both Earth and these space territories, but one colony cluster called Side 3 broke away to form the Principality of Zeon, a people driven by a philosophy that humanity's future lay in space, and a fierce desire for independence from Earth's control. The 1-Year War is the name of the conflict that erupted between these two powers. Zeon opened the war with a series of brutal surprise attacks. Zeon forces pumped lethal G3 nerve gas into inhabited space colonies, killing entire civilian populations. They attempted to weaponize a colony itself by dropping it from orbit onto the Earth Federation's headquarters in an operation called Operation British, and they deployed nuclear weapons during a major fleet engagement called the Battle of Loam. The Federation was no less brutal in response. By the end of this opening period, both sides had each lost nearly half of their total populations. The sheer scale of the carnage forced both powers to the negotiating table, resulting in the Antarctic Treaty, which banned further use of weapons of mass destruction for the remainder of the war. With the Federation's space forces crippled, Zeon seized the initiative and invaded Earth itself, eventually occupying roughly 2/3 of the planet's surface. The war then settled into a grinding stalemate. The tide began to turn in September, when Zeon forces discovered a secret Federation weapons development program called Project V being tested in a space colony called Side 7. The ensuing conflict marks the beginning of the main story of the original Mobile Suit Gundam. However, the true turning point came in November, when the Federation launched Operation Odessa, a major counteroffensive in Eastern Europe that routed Zeon's ground forces and forced a mass retreat. Momentum now firmly with the Federation, they pushed the war back into space, storming Zeon's asteroid fortress of Solomon on Christmas Eve, and then defeating the last major Zeon fleet on New Year's Eve. Zeon surrendered the following day, bringing the 1-Year War to a close exactly 1 year after it began. Despite lasting only a single year, the 1-Year War was the deadliest conflict in the history of the Gundam universe, killing 5.9 billion people, more than half of humanity's total population. The world left behind had only 5.4 billion survivors, and the wounds of the war ran deep enough that its aftermath set the stage for virtually every major conflict that followed in the decades to come. The War of 1996. In the film Independence Day, an enormous alien fleet arrived at Earth on July 2, 1996, intending to harvest the planet's natural resources. Within 2 days, the aliens had destroyed 108 major cities in a systematic campaign of annihilation, killing 3 billion people. Human military forces were helpless against them. The alien ships were protected by force fields that made conventional weapons useless. The tide turned on July 4th when the United States found a way to disable the alien shields. Humanity coordinated a global counterattack, ultimately destroying the alien mothership and ending the invasion in a hard-won victory. The war permanently transformed human civilization. Old nationalistic rivalries fell away as the nations of the world united in its aftermath, and a new international organization called the Earth Space Defense was established to prepare humanity for any future extraterrestrial threats. Judgment Day. In the Terminator universe, Judgment Day is the moment Skynet, an artificial intelligence developed by the United States military, becomes self-aware and immediately turns on humanity. Recognizing that humans would attempt to shut it down, Skynet launches nuclear strikes against the United States, Russia, and other nations, killing 3 billion people and triggering a global war that leaves human civilization in ruins. Because the Terminator series involves time travel, the exact date of Judgment Day shifts across different timelines as past events are altered. In the original timeline, it occurs on August 29th of 1997, but various attempts to prevent it only delay it rather than stop the catastrophe, pushing it to different dates across the 2000s and beyond. In some timelines, Skynet is replaced by a different AI called Legion, but the apocalypse unfolds regardless. The most definitive version of the event is depicted at the end of Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, where, despite all efforts to prevent it, Skynet goes online, seizes control of the American nuclear arsenal, and launches its attack at 6:18 p.m. on July 25, 2004, setting the stage for the post-apocalyptic war shown in Terminator Salvation. The destruction of Alderaan. In Star Wars during the Galactic Civil War, the Rebel Alliance managed to steal the plans to the Empire's most devastating weapon, the Death Star, a moon-sized battle station capable of destroying entire planets. In the course of intercepting those plans, the Empire captured Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan, a prominent figure in the rebellion, and brought her aboard the Death Star. When torture failed to make her reveal the location of the rebel base, the station's commanding officer, Moff Tarkin, threatened to destroy her home planet of Alderaan if she did not comply. Leia, in response, gave him a false location to save her world. Tarkin believed her and destroyed Alderaan anyway, hoping to send an unmistakable message to the rest of the galaxy. This was the price of resistance. The destruction of Alderaan killed approximately 2 billion people in an instant. The sheer scale of the loss sent a powerful disturbance through the Force, felt as a sudden, overwhelming shock by those sensitive to it. Alderaanians who happened to be off-world at the time were left without a home or a people, referring to the event simply as the disaster. On Coruscant, Alderaanian immigrant communities erupted in riots, which the Empire met with lethal force, killing many and arresting countless more. The Rumbling. In the world of Attack on Titan, humanity on the island of Paradise lived protected by 3 massive walls, which were eventually revealed to be constructed from millions of dormant colossal titans frozen in place. This was the work of Karl Fritz, the 145th king of Eldia, who used the threat of unleashing these titans on the world as a deterrent against attacking Paradise, though he secretly swore never to actually do it. Outside Paradise, a nation called Marley sought to seize control of Paradise's resources and its most powerful weapon, the Founding Titan, a unique titan whose power could create and control all other titans. Marley trained special soldiers to infiltrate the walls and claim it. Instead, a man named Grisha Jaeger stole the Founding Titan, eventually passing it to his son, Eren Jaeger. Eren eventually used the Founding Titan to unleash the Rumbling, driven by a desire to protect his people and by a destructive vision of freedom that led him to conclude the only solution was to destroy the outside world. The Titans marched across the mainland, crushing cities, armies, fleets, and civilians indiscriminately as Eren pressed forward. His former friends and allies, joined by soldiers from the nation of Marley, formed a desperate coalition to stop him. They eventually caught up to Eren and battled him directly. It was Mikasa, Eren's childhood friend, who ultimately dealt the killing blow. Eren's death stopped the Rumbling and extinguished the power of the Titans entirely, ending the era of Titans forever. By the time it was over, approximately 80% of all human life on the planet had been wiped out. Crisis on Infinite Earths. In the DC universe, during a time travel experiment at the very beginning of time, a catastrophic accident frees the Anti-Monitor, a godlike being from a parallel universe made of antimatter, who then begins erasing universes one by one using waves of antimatter. To fight back, the Monitor, a benevolent cosmic counterpart to the Anti-Monitor, assembles heroes and villains from across every timeline and dimension to fight back. He is eventually assassinated by his own protege, Harbinger, who was brainwashed by the Anti-Monitor. Leadership of the Resistance then falls to the Spectre, a powerful mystical entity that serves as a spirit of divine vengeance. Over the course of the conflict, Barry Allen dies when he runs himself out of existence to destroy an antimatter weapon, dissolving into the Speed Force, and Supergirl dies fighting the Anti-Monitor directly. In the final battle, the surviving heroes pursue the Anti-Monitor into his own universe and defeat him at the dawn of time. All surviving parallel Earths are then merged into a single unified timeline, reshaping the entire DC universe from that point forward. The death toll of the event was incalculable. The number of universes destroyed was countless, and each universe likely contained quadrillions of lives, leaving the death toll at an incomprehensible scale. Time runs out. In the Marvel Universe, a race of all-powerful beings from beyond existence, called the Beyonders, planted an individual named the Molecule Man as a universe-destroying human bomb in every universe simultaneously, with the intention of using him to eventually reset all of existence. At some point, the Molecule Man became aware of what he was and turned to Dr. Doom for assistance. Doom devised a plan to travel across the multiverse, find every version of the Molecule Man, and kill them one by one, collecting their remains to build a weapon powerful enough to use against the Beyonders. To manage this enormous undertaking, he traveled back in time to give himself more time and build a secret organization of followers called the Black Swans, as he operated under the godlike alias Raboom Alal. However, killing so many versions of the Molecule Man across so many universes put enormous strain on the fabric of reality. The multiverse responded with a natural defense mechanism called incursions, an event where two universes are drawn towards each other on a collision course. Should each universe's Earths collide, they would both be destroyed, but if one of the Earths were destroyed, the universes would pass through one another safely. Noticing this, the Beyonders began systematically killing the most powerful beings in existence across the multiverse to destabilize reality further and accelerate the incursions. They also deployed their own forces to speed up the collisions and hunt Doom, as several other factions continued to emerge with their own agendas related to the incursions. When incursions began threatening Earth-616, the main Marvel universe, a secret group of Marvel's most powerful and influential heroes called the Illuminati intervened. The group, consisting of Iron Man, Reed Richards, Black Panther, Namor, Doctor Strange, and Captain America, had long operated in the shadows, making difficult decisions for the greater good. As they considered destroying other Earths to save their own, Captain America refused the bargain and was forcibly cast out of the group while having his memory of them erased. Doctor Strange, meanwhile, made a dark bargain that cost him his soul and eventually led him to take command of a faction known as the Black Priests. Namor abandoned his moral limits entirely and formed a villainous counterpart group called the Cabal, a group which included Thanos, and they were willing to destroy other Earths without hesitation with the backing of world governments. When Captain America had his memory restored and the truth of what the Illuminati had been doing was exposed, Cap led the Avengers in hunting them down. Eventually, both sides came to understand the full scale of the threat and reunited, splitting into teams to tackle the crisis from multiple angles, including fighting off outside threats, searching for Dr. Doom, and working on a last resort life raft, a vessel designed to survive the end of everything. Doom's mission ultimately reached its conclusion when Doctor Strange tracked him down. Together, they used the Molecule Men as a weapon and detonated them against the Beyonders. The remaining universes, meanwhile, collapsed into each other through incursions until only two were left, Earth-616 and the Ultimate Universe. Their collision marked the end of all existence. Two life rafts were able to survive the final incursion, one carrying a small group of heroes and another carrying the Cabal. Doom, in a final bid to save reality, and having absorbed much of the Beyonders' godlike power, used that power to salvage fragments of destroyed universes and forge them into a single new patchwork reality. With Doctor Strange serving as his second-in-command, Doom ruled the cobbled-together world as an all-powerful god emperor. This new reality, the only one left in existence, was called Battleworld. The fall of the Aeldari. In Warhammer 40k, the Aeldari, an elf-like alien species, were once the dominant civilization in the galaxy, existing long before humans evolved. By the 30th millennium, Aeldari civilization had advanced to such a degree that technology handled all labor, leaving the Aeldari with unlimited freedom. From this idleness, pleasure cults emerged, dedicated to experiencing every possible sensation, and over time, these pursuits descended into extreme hedonism, including torture and murder carried out as a form of art. Because their species had long lifespans, powerful emotions, psychic abilities, and superior intellect, it meant that when they fell into depravity, they fell harder and further than any other race could, and their feelings and experiences resonated on a supernatural level. As more of their society embraced this hedonistic spiral, governments collapsed, cities were consumed by ritualized violence, and millions died. A minority recognized the catastrophe coming and fled to distant, remote worlds before it was too late. These refugees became known as the Exodites, survivors who chose exile over decadence. When a living being dies in the Warhammer universe, its soul passes into the Warp, the parallel supernatural dimension that underlies reality. Aeldari souls are exceptionally powerful due to their intense psychic nature, and as billions of Aeldari died in the violence and excess of their collapsing civilization, their souls poured into the Warp in overwhelming numbers. This flood of psychic energy caused massive warp storms that disrupted travel between the stars, and the spiritual energy of the Aeldari's collective corruption wasn't simply dissipating. It was accumulating, slowly merging into a single vast psychic entity. Then, in the early 30th millennium, it was born. The moment it came into being, it consumed the souls of the vast majority of the Aeldari across the Empire in an instant, killing billions. The sheer force of its birth tore open a permanent wound in reality, a massive rift between the physical universe and the warp called the Eye of Terror. This newborn god was Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure, a chaos god born from the depravity of the Aeldari. The surviving Aeldari were left with a permanent curse, where any Aeldari soul left unprotected at death would be consumed by Slaanesh. This existential threat became the defining feature of Aeldari life, and each surviving faction developed its own method of keeping souls out of her grasp. An estimated more than 99% of the Aeldari were wiped out almost instantaneously upon Slaanesh's birth. Overnight, the galaxy's greatest empire became a handful of desperate surviving groups, often regarded with suspicion by other species, due to their secrecy and willingness to sacrifice others for their own survival. The fall of the Aeldari had sweeping consequences beyond the Aeldari. Slaanesh's birth dispersed the warp storms that had cut off human worlds from one another during what was known as the Age of Strife. This cleared the way for the Emperor of Mankind to reunite humanity, launch the Great Crusade, and build the Imperium, filling the enormous power vacuum the Aeldari had left behind. The Clone Wars. In Star Wars, the Clone Wars were a massive, galaxy-wide war lasting from 22 BBY to 19 BBY between two factions, the Galactic Republic, the existing democratic government, and the Confederacy of Independent Systems, a collection of star systems that seceded from the Republic. The war officially began with the First Battle of Geonosis and quickly spread across the galaxy. Neither side gained a decisive edge early on, as both won major battles at different points, and control of key hyperspace lanes became an early strategic priority for both sides. Fighting continued across the galaxy for the next 2 years, with significant battles taking place on planets including Ryloth, Felucia, Malastare, and Kamino. The Confederacy invested heavily in powerful new weapons during this period. These ranged from conventional arms like the devastating ion cannons mounted on massive warships to more sinister biological weapons, including an engineered variant of a deadly plague known as the Blue Shadow virus. The Republic pushed back with major offensives of its own, including the second assault on Geonosis, which successfully destroyed the planet's droid manufacturing facilities, dealing a significant blow to the Confederacy's ability to produce soldiers. As the war spread, many planets attempted to remove themselves from the conflict. Mandalore, a planet of proud warriors, and numerous others banded together under the Council of Neutral Systems in an attempt to avoid being drawn into the conflict, but the escalating violence made true neutrality increasingly difficult to hold on to. By the third and final year of the war, the Republic had gained the upper hand, pushing the Confederacy back into the Outer Rim. The Republic then launched what became known as the Outer Rim Sieges to finish them off. In a desperate attempt to turn the tide, General Grievous led a massive surprise attack on Coruscant, striking through a rarely used route called the Deep Core. The assault ultimately failed, as the Confederacy lost much of its fleet in the battle and Count Dooku, the Confederacy's head of state, was killed. Grievous himself was soon defeated and killed shortly after at the Battle of Utapau. What almost no one knew on either side was that the entire war had been engineered from the start by Darth Sidious. He had been playing both the Republic and the Confederacy against each other, with an ultimate goal to destroy the Jedi Order, seize absolute power, and transform the Republic into a galactic empire with himself as Emperor. After Sidious's identity was revealed as the Dark Lord of the Sith, Senior Jedi Master Mace Windu and a group of Jedi attempted to arrest him, but he survived with the help of Anakin Skywalker, a Jedi Knight whom Sidious had been secretly manipulating. As a result, Skywalker turned to the dark side of the Force and became Sidious's new apprentice, taking the name Darth Vader. Sidious then declared the Jedi traitors and activated Order 66, an order which compelled the clone army to turn on and kill their Jedi commanders, triggering a galaxy-wide purge of the Jedi Order. Meanwhile, Vader traveled to the planet Mustafar and killed the Separatist Council, eliminating the Confederacy's remaining leadership. With both the Jedi and Confederacy destroyed, Sidious appeared before the Republic's Senate, declaring the war over, and proclaimed the Republic's transformation into the Galactic Empire. The Clone Wars ultimately claimed the lives of billions of soldiers and civilians across the galaxy, and ended with the rise of a dictatorship that had secretly started the conflict in the first place. Starkiller Base. Continuing in the Star Wars universe, the Hosnian Cataclysm took place in 34 ABY during a tense political standoff known as the Cold War, between the New Republic, the democratic government that had replaced the Empire after its fall, and the First Order, a military power that had risen from the Empire's remnants. The First Order carried out the Hosnian Cataclysm using Starkiller Base, a superweapon built into a planet in the unknown regions of the galaxy capable of destroying whole star systems at once. The First Order fired this weapon at the Hosnian system, wiping out 5 worlds simultaneously, one of which was the New Republic's capital. The destruction was so catastrophic that it sent a ripple through sub-hyperspace, making the event visible across the galaxy in real time. The decimation of the Hosnian system didn't just kill billions of people, it collapsed the New Republic as a functioning government almost instantly. With its Senate annihilated and much of its military crippled in the strike, the New Republic had no central authority left to coordinate a response. The senators who survived turned their attention inward, redirecting whatever forces remained to protect their own home planets rather than mounting any unified defense. The result was a power vacuum that the First Order moved quickly to fill. Systems across the galaxy either fell to First Order conquest or surrendered outright, and the galaxy's dominant governing power shifted nearly overnight. The Resistance, a military organization led by General Leia Organa, launched an immediate counterattack. The resulting Battle of Starkiller Base ended with the destruction of the superweapon. The death toll of the Hosnian Cataclysm itself has never been precisely established, but given that 5 worlds were destroyed simultaneously, it was almost certainly in the billions to tens of billions, if not higher. The Reign of Death. In the Robotech universe, the Reign of Death, also called the Zentradi Holocaust, was a catastrophic event in which Earth came under attack from an alien military force called the Zentradi, a warrior species of giant humanoids who had been at war with humanity's defenders. Their supreme commander, Dulza, arrived with nearly 5 million warships and proceeded to bombard Earth's surface, destroying 70% of the planet. What appeared to be a total victory for Dolza was interrupted when Earth fired back with the Grand Cannon, a massive superweapon, which wiped out a significant portion of the fleet positioned over the northern hemisphere. Though the Zentradi managed to disable the cannon before it could fire again, the counterattack wasn't over. The SDF-1, humanity's main warship, which was a massive alien vessel they had reverse-engineered, launched its own counterattack. Alongside a faction of Zentradi defectors, they destroyed the Imperial Grand Fleet entirely. The Reign of Death left Earth in ruins and set in motion a chain of crises that would define the planet's future. The losses on both sides were staggering. Billions of humans were killed, leaving only a few million survivors on a ruined planet, while somewhere between 45 and 50 billion Zentradi died as Dolza's nearly 5 million strong armada was completely wiped out. The Succession Wars. In the universe of BattleTech, the Succession Wars were 3 centuries of near constant warfare fought between the 5 most powerful noble houses of a star-spanning human civilization. They began after the ruling dynasty, House Cameron, was wiped out, triggering a brutal power struggle among the surviving houses, each seeking to claim the top seat of authority. After a civil war toppled the Star League, the unified government that had ruled humanity's interstellar civilization, its ruling council met in the wreckage of the capital city in 2780 to figure out what came next. The council, made up of the leaders of the 5 noble houses, couldn't agree on who should take the top seat of power and spent months bribing and maneuvering against each other before the council formally dissolved in 2781. General Alexander Kerensky, who commanded the Star League's massive military, had enough popular support to take control himself, but chose instead to spend 2 years trying to hold the old order together through diplomacy. It didn't work. The Great Houses were too busy rebuilding their own armies and trying to poach soldiers from the Star League's forces. Seeing no path forward, Kerensky in 2784 led the bulk of the Star League's military on a mass exodus out of known space entirely. With that military force gone, the noble houses wasted no time filling the power vacuum, seizing worlds that had previously been held under the Star League's direct control, leading to centuries of conflicts known as the Succession Wars. Centuries of fighting left humanity's interstellar civilization so depleted that certain assets became virtually irreplaceable, particularly jump ships, the massive vessels that make faster-than-light travel between star systems possible, as well as functioning factories and populated cities. Informal rules emerged among the warring houses to avoid destroying these critical resources, and warfare settled into a slow rhythm of raids, ransom, and salvage rather than all-out warfare. As the central governments of the Great Houses grew weaker over this long decline, local noble lords accumulated more power, giving society an increasingly feudal character. Near the end of the Succession Wars, a discovery offered hope. A data cache called the Helm Memory Core, found in 3028, contained preserved knowledge from the old Star League that potentially allowed lost technologies to be recovered and rebuilt. That same year, the fourth of the Succession Wars erupted. Short by the standards of its predecessors, lasting only from 3028 to 3030, it produced something almost unheard of in 3 centuries of conflict: a decisive winner. The Federated Commonwealth, an alliance between 2 of the Great Houses, emerged dominant and was the most powerful single force seen since the fall of the Star League. Over the course of the Succession Wars, hundreds of worlds were stripped of life entirely, leading to billions of lives lost, and a great deal of scientific and industrial knowledge was lost through the destruction of records, facilities, and the people who carried that expertise, setting humanity back centuries in technological development. This accumulated loss of knowledge became known as lost tech, technology that still existed in old machines and structures, but that no one left alive knew how to understand, maintain, or reproduce. The Fires of Ibis. In the Armored Core series, specifically the Armored Core 6 timeline, Rubicon 3 is a planet rich in coral, a living substance made of microscopic organisms that appear as a red, wispy mass. Coral was extraordinarily valuable to humanity because it produced massive amounts of energy when burned, making it useful for fuel, weapons, and control systems. However, it was also dangerously volatile, highly addictive when consumed as a drug, and capable of explosive growth in a vacuum. Decades before the Coral War, which was a different major conflict centered on control of coral, humanity had already discovered and begun heavily exploiting coral on Rubicon 3. The exploitation set the stage for the fires of Ibis, a catastrophe caused by coral's volatile nature. An individual named Professor Nagai, who was the head of the Rubicon Research Institute, a scientific body studying coral, eventually made an alarming discovery about the substance, and in an attempt to contain whatever he had found, Nagai deployed the Ibis series of coral-based weapons and triggered a catastrophic, self-sustaining fire fueled by coral. The blaze consumed not just Rubicon 3, but the entire surrounding star system, destroying virtually all life and wiping out the civilization and infrastructure of every world within it, turning the region into what became known as the Burning Star System. All coral appeared to be destroyed in the flames, leaving Rubicon 3 a barren wasteland. The planet was abandoned for decades, its few survivors left to rebuild from almost nothing. The trauma ran deep, particularly for native Rubiconians, and the remnants of the Institute itself, which dissolved in the aftermath of the disaster it had caused. The Faro Plague Swarm. In the universe of Horizon Zero Dawn, Ted Faro was the head of Faro Automated Solutions, a powerful robotics corporation in the late 21st century. His company produced the Chariot Line, a series of military robots designed to operate as a swarm. They were extraordinarily dangerous, capable of replicating themselves exponentially, consuming organic matter as fuel, and hacking and taking over enemy machines. Faro made the decision to protect them with nearly unbreakable encryption and no remote shutdown capability, meaning there was no way to stop them from the outside if something went wrong. And wrong it went. In October of 2064, a Chariot military robot swarm operated by the Hearts-Teamer Corporation malfunctioned and turned on its own operators. With no backdoor shutdown available in the design, Ted Faro brought in Dr. Liz Sobek, a leading scientist, to assess the situation. She found that the malfunction had made the swarm fully autonomous, and they were no longer following any outside commands. Given that the robots were designed to replicate exponentially and consume organic matter as fuel, she determined they were already beyond any hope of containment. She projected the rogue swarm would consume every living thing on Earth within less than 15 months. Recognizing that the Faro Plague could not be stopped, Dr. Sobek devised a plan to survive it. Her project, called Zero Dawn, centered on an artificial intelligence named Gaia, a master system that would oversee the complete rebuilding of Earth after the extinction was complete. Gaia would manage a network of subordinate systems handling every step of recovery, detoxifying the devastated planet, reintroducing plant and animal life, and eventually recreating humanity itself, educating the new humans that emerged in the process. One of Gaia's long-term tasks would also be cracking the swarm's encrypted shutdown codes so the machines could finally be deactivated. Ted Faro, responsible for the catastrophe, was pressured into funding the project. To buy the time needed to complete Zero Dawn's construction, a separate effort called Operation Enduring Victory was launched, a massive military campaign that gave humanity the false hope that they were fighting toward victory against the swarm. Just as Sobek had predicted, the Faro Plague consumed all organic matter on Earth, wiping out every living thing and leaving the planet toxic and barren. With nothing left to feed on, the machines went dormant. Project Zero Dawn then did exactly what it was designed to do. Gaia cracked the encrypted shutdown codes through sheer computational force, deactivating the dormant swarm across the entire planet. With the machines neutralized, Gaia began the long process of restoring Earth's environment and rebuilding life from scratch. The Invasion. In a quiet place, on June 18th of 2020, creatures known as Death Angels arrived on Earth after their home planet was destroyed by an unknown catastrophic event. Their planet broke apart into a meteor shower that eventually crashed onto Earth. The meteor struck multiple major locations worldwide, including New York, Shanghai, and Millbrook, as 127 confirmed meteor landing sites were recorded. The largest fragment hit Mexico, recording an impact equivalent to that of an atomic bomb. The Death Angels immediately began attacking humans and animals upon arrival. Nearly impossible to fight off, they were protected by extremely durable shells and armed with sharp claws, while their hypersensitive hearing allowed them to detect and hunt by sound. Any noise drew them in, forcing survivors to live in near total silence. The world's militaries, including the US military, were unable to stop the Death Angels, since their armored skin made them resistant to conventional weapons. Soldiers deployed in New York suffered heavy casualties alongside police, leaving the civilian population largely unprotected. Eventually, a key weakness of the Death Angels was discovered. They were incapable of swimming and would drown in deep water. Using this knowledge, the US National Guard organized mass evacuations, moving survivors by ship and plane to islands separated from the mainland while destroying bridges and tunnels to keep the creatures out. Despite the discovery of the invaders' weakness to water, the Death Angels still managed to kill the vast majority of the world's population during the initial invasion, leaving humanity on the brink of extinction. The Great War. In the Fallout universe, on October 23rd of 2077, a full-scale nuclear exchange between China and the United States brought civilization as it existed to an end. This event, known as the Great War, lasted only a matter of hours but left the world permanently scarred and marked the beginning of the iconic post-apocalyptic setting of Fallout. The decades leading up to the Great War were defined by a global scramble for dwindling natural resources. Starting in the early 2050s, nations began going to war over oil, as the US invaded Mexico to seize its oil fields, and European powers launched a costly invasion of the Middle East. A mysterious illness called the New Plague further destabilized the US at home, and the United Nations, unable to manage the mounting crises, collapsed entirely. Tensions between the US and China came to a head in 2066 when America cut off petroleum exports to protect its own supplies in Alaska. China, desperate for resources, responded by invading Alaska, kicking off the Sino-American War. To the north, Canada was effectively absorbed by the US after resisting American pressure tied to the war effort. By the mid-2070s, the US had pushed back against China, deploying advanced power armor and eventually reclaiming Alaska at the Battle of Anchorage in early 2077. However, the victory was hollow. The broader war with China ground into a stalemate, peace talks went nowhere, and the world remained on a knife's edge. Then, on October 23rd of 2077, the United States detected the launch of Chinese warheads. The United States ordered a retaliatory strike, and within minutes nuclear bombs were falling on major cities across the globe. The exchange lasted roughly 2 hours and devastated the world. Though the majority of the warheads were smaller than the largest real-world nuclear weapons, sheer volume meant vast clouds of irradiated debris were thrown into the atmosphere, spreading fallout across the entire planet and permanently altering Earth's ecosystem for centuries to come. The death toll was almost incomprehensible. An estimated 7.5 billion people were killed, either instantly or in the aftermath, from radiation and starvation, leaving humanity in a state of survival for centuries to come. Captain Trips. In Stephen King's novel, The Stand, Captain Trips is a man-made superflu developed in secret by the US government in an underground laboratory beneath California's Mojave Desert under the codename Project Blue. The origin of the nickname Captain Trips is never explained. On June 13th of 1990, the virus escaped the facility during a containment breach that killed everyone inside, except a security guard named Charlie Campion, who fled the Mojave with his wife and child. Charlie made it as far as a gas station in Arnett, Texas, before dying on June 16th. By then, it was already too late. The virus had spread to the locals, and by June 18th, it was moving explosively across America and then the world. Captain Trips was devastating in part because of how effectively it spread. With a communicability rate of 99% and a mortality rate of 99%, almost no one who was exposed survived, and almost no one avoided exposure. The US government attempted to contain the panic by dismissing it as an ordinary flu and suppressing the truth, with the military shutting down news networks, killing protesters, and silencing journalists who broke the story, but these efforts failed. Hospitals overflowed, towns were quarantined, and society unraveled into riots and mass death. The president, himself infected, gave a final public address denying the plague's true nature and the government's role in creating it. By July 4th of 1990, less than 3 weeks after the breach, the virus had effectively burned through the global population and run its course, having killed 99.4% of humanity. What was left behind was a world of decaying cities, clogged highways, and scattered survivors facing an uncertain future. The Machine War. In the Matrix universe, the Machine War was a massive global conflict between humanity and a nation of self-aware artificial intelligences known as Zero-One. The conflict grew out of a long struggle between sentient AIs and their human allies seeking equal rights for AIs and the ability to coexist peacefully. However, the machines faced widespread fear and hatred from humanity, leading to violent crackdowns, including the mass shutdown and outright extermination of conscious AIs around the world. In response to this prejudice, the surviving machines banded together and founded their own independent nation, Zero-One. They attempted to join the United Nations as a legitimate state, but were rejected, and the international community moved to destroy Zero-One entirely. The machines fought back, and what had started as a civil rights movement gradually escalated over decades into an all-out war of annihilation on both sides. As humanity began to lose the war, in a last-ditch effort, they attempted to block out the sun, the machine's primary energy source, by deliberately darkening the sky. The plan backfired catastrophically, permanently destroying much of the planet's ecosystem and ultimately doing nothing to stop the machines. The war ended with the machines achieving total control of Earth. With human civilization in ruins, the surviving human population was captured and imprisoned inside a vast simulated reality called the Matrix, a computer-generated world designed to keep humans docile and unaware of their true situation. The machines used this captive population as a living power source, effectively farming humans for energy while maintaining total dominion over the planet. For 5 centuries after their victory, the machines maintained control through a carefully engineered cycle. Periodically, a person of extraordinary ability called the One would emerge within the Matrix, whose purpose was to effectively reboot the system. This cycle repeated itself across 6 generations. However, the 6th One, a man named Neo, was the first to reject this predetermined role. Instead of resetting the Matrix, Neo negotiated a truce with the machines. He would destroy a rogue AI called Agent Smith, who had become an uncontrollable threat to both the Matrix and the machines themselves, in exchange for peace with Zion, the last free human city. The machines agreed. Neo defeated Smith, but did not survive. True to the truce, the machines honored the agreement, and any human who wished to wake up from the Matrix was allowed to do so, finally bringing the machine war to a close. In total, the conflict claimed billions of lives. The overwhelming majority of humanity had been wiped out during the initial wars, while the remaining survivors were enslaved within the Matrix. The Dominion War. In the Star Trek universe, the Dominion War was a massive interstellar conflict fought from 2373 to 2375. It drew in virtually every major civilization across 2 regions of the galaxy: the Alpha Quadrant, home to most of the familiar Star Trek factions, and the Gamma Quadrant, a distant region connected to the Alpha Quadrant by a stable wormhole, and home to the Dominion. The war split these powers into 2 opposing sides. On one side was the Federation Alliance, led by the United Federation of Planets, a democratic union of hundreds of worlds, alongside the Klingon Empire and the Romulan Star Empire. On the other side was the Breen Dominion Alliance, featuring the Dominion, which was an authoritarian empire ruled by shape-shifting beings called the Founders, who command a vast military, paired with the Breen, a militaristic and enigmatic species. The war had been building for years before it officially began. The Dominion had spent that time quietly infiltrating governments and stirring up political chaos on the other side of the wormhole, softening up the Alpha Quadrant before striking. Their key move was forming an alliance with the Cardassian Union, a formerly powerful and militaristic civilization that had fallen on hard times, giving the Dominion a physical base of operations on the Alpha Quadrant side of the wormhole. The early war went badly for the Federation. The Dominion seized Deep Space Nine, a space station positioned right at the mouth of the wormhole, which gave them the ability to funnel unlimited reinforcements from their home territory. A turning point came when Captain Benjamin Sisko, the station's commanding officer, led a successful effort to retake Deep Space Nine. More critically, Federation forces found a way to block the wormhole, cutting off the Dominion from its reinforcement pipeline in the Gamma Quadrant. Suddenly fighting with only the forces they already had in the Alpha Quadrant, the Dominion's position became far more vulnerable, and the Alliance was able to slowly build enough strength to push back. As the war dragged on, it pushed the Federation into increasingly dark territory. Starfleet, the Federation's military and exploratory arm, found itself resorting to tactics that contradicted its own values. Section 31, a rogue Black Ops organization operating outside official oversight, secretly engineered a biological weapon and used it to infect the Founders. Meanwhile, Captain Sisko personally manipulated events to trick the Romulan Star Empire into entering the war on the Allied side, a deception that worked, but at a personal moral cost he openly acknowledged. On the Dominion side of the war, cracks were forming. The Cardassians found themselves treated as expendable. A prominent Cardassian leader eventually turned against the Dominion and led a resistance movement from within. The war ended at the Battle of Cardassia, where the combined Allied forces and the Cardassian rebels overwhelmed the Dominion's last defenses. The female changeling, the commander of the Dominion forces in the Alpha Quadrant, agreed to surrender under one condition: that Odo, a changeling who had fought on the Federation's side throughout the war, returned to the Great Link, the collective shared existence that changelings inhabit together, and use his knowledge of the outside world to guide his people toward peace and cure them of the disease Section 31 had unleashed on them. The ultimate cost of the war was staggering. Estimates place the total death toll somewhere between 800 million and 2 billion people across both quadrants. The Thrassian Plague. In the world of the Elder Scrolls during Tamriel's First Era, a catastrophic plague swept across the continent of Tamriel. It's believed to have been unleashed by the Slode, a hostile slug-like race of sorcerers who inhabit the island of Thrass off Tamriel's western coast and have a long history of attacking the continent. The plague was unlike any natural disease. Its victims were struck by a supernatural, unquenchable thirst, compelling them to drink until their bodies swelled and literally broke apart. More than half of Tamriel's total population perished, with the western coastlines nearest to the Thrass hit hardest. The political fallout was enormous. Two regions in particular were changed forever. Valenwood, a forested province in the south, was so weakened that it was subsequently conquered by the Cyrodiilic Empire, the dominant imperial power of the era, and elsewhere, home to the cat-like Khajiit people, which saw its network of tribal alliances collapse under the strain of the plague, setting it on a path toward imperial control as well. In response, the nations of Tamriel united under a joint military fleet called the All Flags Navy. They sailed to Thrass and devastated it in retaliation. Ultimately, the plague, because of its horrific death toll of half of Tamriel's total population, accelerated the Cyrodiilic Empire's expansion, making it one of the most consequential events in Tamriel's ancient history. The Ideon Judgment. In the show Space Runaway Ideon, in the year 2300, a group of archaeologists on the planet Solo, located in the Andromeda Galaxy, uncovered two remarkable ancient artifacts: a massive spaceship called the Solo Ship, and three enormous armored tanks capable of combining into a massive robot known as the Ideon. After 6 months of restoration work, the team had been unable to get the tanks to move. Then, an alien civilization called the Buff Clan arrived on Solo. The youngest daughter of the Buff Clan military commander defied orders and flew down to Solo with her assistant to investigate the planet, and so the commanding officer sent soldiers after her. The soldiers lost track of her, and the Buff Clan, assuming the human colonists on Solo had attacked her, launched an assault on the planet. Meanwhile, a boy named Cosmo and his friends climbed into the 3 tanks, which suddenly activated on their own. The tanks combined to form the Ideon, and the 3 managed to fight off the Buff Clan's first attack. Throughout the series, the crew of the solo ship fought to survive against the Buff Clan, and the true nature of the Ideon's power source, the Ide, began to reveal itself. The Ide was a mysterious, infinite, and sentient cosmic force connected to the emotions, fears, and survival instincts of living beings, with a particular sensitivity to children. The Buff Clan had long revered it as a legendary, almost sacred power, and had been searching the universe for it. Crucially, the Ide grew stronger the more conflict, death, and fear surrounded it, meaning the escalating war between humans and the Buff Clan only made it more dangerous. As the war reached its peak, the Buff Clan deployed a massive superweapon called the Gondoroa, and the Ideon's power spiraled beyond control. The solo ship, the Buff Clan fleet, and eventually entire planets and civilizations were consumed by the violence. Neither side was able to stop fighting, even at the cost of everything. The Ide, witnessing the total destruction of both civilizations, passed a final judgment. Both sides had failed. In a last catastrophic release of energy, the Ideon and the Gondoroa were destroyed, and the Ide effectively erased what remained of both human civilization and the Buff Clan. The death toll was, in essence, every living being in the universe. In the aftermath, the souls of the dead were seen drifting through space together, suggesting that, out of total annihilation, some form of renewal may follow. The Last Great Time War. In the Doctor Who universe, the last great Time War was a conflict fought between the Time Lords and the Daleks for the fate of all creation. The Time Lords were an ancient civilization from the planet Gallifrey, best known for mastering time travel and jealously guarding that technology. They established the rules governing how time could and couldn't be used, maintaining a kind of cosmic order to keep history stable and rational. Time Lords could perceive the past, present, and possible futures, and had a strong instinct to protect events that were meant to happen. They had near immortality because of a unique ability to regenerate rather than die. Other civilizations held them in reverence, with some even worshipping them as gods. The Daleks were a race of genetically engineered mutants from the planet Skaro, permanently housed inside armored mechanical shells. Deeply xenophobic and driven by an ingrained compulsion to destroy all non-Dalek life, they were feared across the universe. The war between the Time Lords and the Daleks was staggering in scale. It lasted around 400 years, but because both sides wielded time travel, it was fought across countless eras and even alternate timelines, with the Daleks continuously opening new fronts by planting themselves throughout different points in history. In that sense, the war spanned all of time, making it effectively endless in its reach. At the heart of the war, the scale of death was almost incomprehensible. Millions of lives were lost and restored every second as both sides continuously manipulated time itself. In the final battle, the Daleks deployed quintillions of soldiers and a fleet of 10 million warships. The Time Lords responded with over 1 million of their own battle-ready TARDISes. By the war's end, the Daleks had driven the Time Lords all the way back to Gallifrey and launched a full assault on the planet itself. The conclusion was catastrophic for both sides. Gallifrey appeared to be destroyed, Skaro was left in ruin, and of the entire Time Lord civilization, seemingly only 3 of them survived. The Daleks fared a little better, but with still only a handful remaining, with the final death tolls from the conflict likely ranging in the several trillions. Dark Knights. In DC Comics, the Dark Knights are both a series of DC stories and a team of evil Batmen recruited by the Batman Who Laughs to serve the Dark God Barbados. The Batman Who Laughs is a version of Bruce Wayne from a twisted shadow reality called the Dark Multiverse, a dimension born from every fear, bad decision, and nightmare ever conceived. In this world, the Joker murdered Batman's friends and family and unleashed a toxin derived from his own madness on all of Gotham. Batman, in response, finally killed the Joker, but in doing so, was exposed to the toxin. The toxin left Bruce's intelligence, discipline, and strategic mind fully intact, while stripping away all his morality and sanity, replacing it with the Joker's cruelty and sadism. He then proceeded to completely destroy his own home world. Meanwhile, Barbatos is an ancient, evil bat god also originating from the dark multiverse. He was created to destroy unstable universes, but turned on his creator and killed him. He then secretly manipulating Bruce Wayne's entire life, going so far as to be the very bat that flew through Bruce's window the night he chose his identity, all to transform Bruce into a living key that would open a doorway between the dark multiverse and the main DC universe. Barbatos did just this, using Batman as a doorway to bring the Dark Knights into the main DC universe. The Dark Knights were a team of 7 evil Batmen, each pulled from a dying world in the dark multiverse, and each one is a twisted fusion of Batman with another Justice League member's powers or themes. They invade Earth, seizing major cities including Gotham, Metropolis, Central City, Coast City, Amnesty Bay, Detroit, and Washington, D.C. The Justice League struggles to fight back because each of these Batmen is a version of Bruce Wayne, meaning they know the heroes intimately and have been specifically designed to exploit each one's weaknesses. Once they've taken hold of the planet, the Dark Knights use a powerful cosmic device called the Anti-Monitor's Tuning Fork to try to anchor and stabilize Barbatos' invasion, with the goal of remaking Earth into an extension of the dark multiverse. The hero's path to victory runs through something called Element X, also known as 10th Metal, a purely creative substance capable of countering the darkness of the dark multiverse. Ultimately, the Justice League channels the power of 10th Metal, defeats the Dark Knights, pulls Earth free from the dark multiverse's grip, and stops Barbatos. The cost of victory, however, is severe. A cosmic barrier called the Source Wall shatters, leaving the DC universe exposed to threats even larger than Barbatos. Then, in the story Dark Knight's Death Metal, the dark multiverse successfully consumes Earth, the Justice League falls, and a godlike cosmic villain named Perpetua rises to power. Wonder Woman becomes the central hero of this conflict, where she kills the Batman who laughs, but his followers harvest his brain to create something worse: the Darkest Knight, essentially the Batman who laughs, elevated to near omnipotent power. He betrays Perpetua and attempts to remake all of reality into endless nightmare worlds, but Wonder Woman ultimately defeats him and helps reshape existence into a larger structure called the Omniverse, one that preserves all of DC's history. The devastation across both stories is staggering. Countless universes were destroyed or consumed. Earth was remade into a hellscape. The Western United States was annihilated following the death of Captain Atom. Themyscira was destroyed, and so many Green Lantern Corps members were killed that thousands of their rings were left scattered across Earth, with the conflict ultimately ending in a complete universal reset. The Cybertronian Civil War. In the Transformers multiverse, the Cybertronian Civil War is a conflict fought on the planet Cybertron, the homeworld of the Transformers, a race of sentient robots, between two factions, the heroic Autobots and the villainous Decepticons. Depending on which universe one is exploring, the war breaks out for different reasons, including a shortage of Energon, the Decepticons' desire to conquer the universe, a struggle over powerful ancient artifacts, and even rebellion against long-standing oppression and stagnation on Cybertron, among other origins. The Autobots are typically led by Optimus Prime, and the Decepticons by Megatron, though other characters occasionally take the helm on either side. The war never stays on Cybertron for long. It spills across the galaxy and eventually reaches Earth, drawing humans into the conflict. Most human characters who get involved end up siding with the Autobots, though a handful have allied with the Decepticons. In the original 1980s cartoon, the war spans millions of years. The death toll varies by version of the story, but one continuity puts it at over 100 billion lives lost. The Gothic War. In the universe of Warhammer 40,000, the Gothic War, also known as the 12th Black Crusade, was a major conflict that took place between 40,139 AD and 40,160 AD. It was launched by Abaddon the Despoiler, a warlord who serves as the supreme commander of the Forces of Chaos, a faction of corrupted demonic forces who worship malevolent gods known as the Ruinous Powers or the Chaos Gods. Abaddon is notably rumored to be a clone descendant of Horus Lupercal, the greatest traitor in the history of the Imperium of Man. Abaddon did the unthinkable by uniting the normally fractious and competing followers of the different Chaos Gods under a single banner. Leading his elite warriors, the Black Legion, alongside the broader forces of chaos, he poured out of the Eye of Terror, a massive permanent Terran reality that serves as a stronghold for chaos forces, and into normal space. His target was the Gothic sector, a strategically significant region of the Imperium, which he plunged into over 2 decades of war. The sector was cut off from the rest of the Imperium for nearly a decade by warp storms. The conflict involved hundreds of planetary invasions and space battles and resulted in the destruction of several planets as well as 4 of the 6 known Blackstone fortresses, enormous alien-built structures of great strategic importance. It only came to an end when Imperial reinforcements finally arrived, forcing Abaddon to retreat back into the warp. The 21-year war cost billions of lives, wiped out countless warships, and killed or incapacitated several high-ranking Imperial figures. What almost no one knew was that this war was simply one piece of a much larger plan called the Crimson Path, Abaddon's long-term strategy to carve a path from the Eye of Terror all the way to Holy Terra, the Imperium's sacred homeworld, with Abaddon's ultimate goal being to finish what his predecessor Horus once nearly accomplished, storming the Imperial Palace on Terra and destroying the Emperor himself. Godzilla Earth. In the Godzilla Earth universe, humanity had been under attack from giant monsters since 1999. In 2030, 3 monsters, Anguirus, Varan, and Baragon, appeared off the coast of Los Angeles. A 4th, far larger creature followed them. This was the first time humanity had ever seen Godzilla. The US Army had defense lines set up in Los Angeles, but Godzilla fired a charged particle beam at one of the other monsters that released a powerful electromagnetic pulse, instantly disabling all weapons and electronics in the city. He then killed the 3 monsters and turned on humanity, destroying Los Angeles and killing 8.7 million people. Attempts to stop him failed completely. Bunker buster bombs dropped by the US Army had no effect, and Godzilla went on to destroy San Francisco, burning the city to the ground. After the attack, he disappeared into the Pacific Ocean. Despite extensive search efforts, during which 3 nuclear submarines were lost, the military was unable to track him. In 2031, Godzilla destroyed a naval strike group near Washington before attacking the west coast of North America once again. Despite the city of Colorado Springs being heavily fortified, he tore through it with ease, breaking the US Army's strongest defensive line. A last resort strike of 150 nuclear bombs did not affect him whatsoever. During a live broadcast of these events, the US president broke down on air, declared Godzilla to be the beast of Revelation from the Bible, and took his own life. Godzilla continued across the continent to the Gulf of Mexico, then vanished into the Atlantic Ocean. The entire west coast had been destroyed, and the eastern part of the country was left fractured and divided. In the aftermath, a cult emerged that worshipped Godzilla and nuclear weapons, leading to mass sacrifices across inland regions. Then, in 2034, Godzilla attacked Western Europe. Around 6 million people were killed, and humanity was forced to abandon the continent entirely before Godzilla disappeared into the Arctic Sea. The destruction didn't end there. Other monsters fleeing Europe to escape Godzilla moved eastward and tore through the same routes, being used by refugees, causing further casualties and devastating the land and its ecosystems. Around this time, Earth was visited by 2 alien species, the Bilusolido and the Exif. Between 2042 and 2044, Godzilla appeared 8 times, killing more than 300 million people. Humanity was forced to abandon the entire east coast of North America, northern Africa, and half of Eurasia. Though the alliance with the Bilusolido and Exif had significantly advanced humanity's military technology, none of it was capable of stopping Godzilla. In 2045, a massive operation was launched to bury Godzilla alive beneath the Himalayas using roughly 2,000 nuclear bombs. It worked, temporarily. While trapped underground, however, Godzilla fed on molten magma and continued building energy. By 2046, he had begun moving through the magma itself, triggering a massive volcanic eruption that killed many of the troops stationed nearby. He then destroyed the mountain bedrock and broke free, resuming his path of destruction. Approximately 200 million people were killed across Eurasia and another 100 million in Japan. The last major battle against him in Japan ended in total defeat and included the loss of Mechagodzilla, a powerful weapon specifically developed to fight the monster. In 2048, Godzilla reached Latin America, humanity's last remaining stronghold. He destroyed the final defense line and demolished the United Earth headquarters in Brazil. With nowhere left to retreat, humanity evacuated Earth entirely aboard 2 massive interstellar ships. By the time they left, Godzilla and the other monsters had killed several billion people. Over the next 20,000 years, Godzilla reshaped the planet into a hostile alien environment. When humanity eventually returned, Earth had been transformed into a single, massive, interconnected organism, a world dominated entirely by Godzilla. The Mushroom War. The Mushroom War was a global conflict that took place roughly 1,000 years before the events of the show Adventure Time. While the full details of what caused it remains unclear, it escalated into an all-out nuclear war with evidence of widespread military mobilization and conventional fighting as well. Based on various clues, it likely occurred sometime between the 1980s and the 2010s. The war's most consequential moment was the detonation of a special mutagenic bomb over North America. Beyond its destructive power, the weapon awakened an ancient evil entity known as the Lich, triggered a resurgence of magic in the world, and caused widespread mutation across Earth's living creatures. The war was essentially the end of humanity. Most people were killed either in the initial nuclear blasts or in the collapse of civilization that followed, with the possibility of a nuclear winter making survival even harder. Survivors faced further danger from newly created mutant creatures, such as oozers and mutant coyotes, that emerged from the fallout and hunted humanity. Other dangerous beings like vampires and rainicorns also reappeared from hiding or from other dimensions, further driving humans towards extinction. A small number of people managed to escape by fleeing to space or taking shelter in fallout bunkers, which is how the species survived at all. The world that existed afterward became the world of Adventure Time, full of magic, strange creatures, and the ruins of the old world. As a result of the near extinction of humanity, the death toll for the Mushroom War is undoubtedly in the several billions. When Day Breaks. Before getting into this one, it's worth contextualizing that SCP is a collaborative fiction project built around a secret organization that documents and contains supernatural anomalies. SCP-001 is a special designation reserved for proposals about the most significant possible anomaly. Multiple authors have written competing versions, each treated as a candidate for the real one. SCP-001, When Day Breaks, describes a world where sunlight has become catastrophic to all living things. Any exposure to visible light, including moonlight since it reflects the sun, causes living tissue to begin melting until the entire organism is transformed into a soft, waxy, gelatinous mass. The process cannot be stopped once it starts, and technically, the victims don't die. These transformed beings, called SCP-001-A instances, persist in a semi-liquid state while retaining echoes of what they were. Animals still behave like animals, humans keep fragments of memory, personality, and awareness, effectively conscious inside a melted body. Plants transform as well, but continue to absorb light and photosynthesize. The transformed beings still move, communicate, and seek out survivors. Not to kill them, but to convert them. When 2 transformed masses touch, they merge, and these collectives can grow without any apparent restraint to their size. What makes them especially disturbing is their behavior toward the living. They call out using familiar voices, imitate loved ones, and plead with survivors to come outside into the sun, framing the transformation as something freeing. The Foundation, the secret organization responsible for containing supernatural threats, issued emergency guidelines telling survivors to cover every inch of skin, avoid traveling on foot, and use buildings for cover. Anyone exposed to the light is to be considered lost. Within the first day of the emergence of this phenomena, an estimated 6.8 billion people were affected, though casualties is a difficult word to apply since the transformed are not dead. However, they are clearly no longer human, and thus to call this a deadly event is not unreasonable. The Green Flu. In the Left 4 Dead universe, the Green Flu is a mysterious, fast-mutating virus responsible for a zombie outbreak. The virus behaves similarly to rabies and can spread through bodily fluids or occasionally through the air. Authorities labeled it a form of influenza, widely believed to be a cover-up to prevent mass panic. In rare cases, some people are naturally immune and become carriers, where they don't turn but can still spread the infection. Its origins are unknown, though biochemical weapon experiments are suspected. Most people infected by the virus become common infected, recognizable by pale skin, yellow eyes, and hair loss. Their brains appear to be damaged in a way that removes the ability to feel hunger, thirst, fatigue, or regulate body temperature, likely causing starvation and physical deterioration over time. In rare cases, the virus mutates more drastically in certain individuals, producing special infected. These are physically stronger than common infected and develop unique abilities, with each case presenting its own distinct mutations, suggesting the virus affects people differently depending on the individual. Since each type of special infected shares nearly identical physical traits with others of its kind, their mutations likely stem from common pre-existing factors in the individual, possibly genetics or certain substances already present in the body before infection. Smokers with significant lung damage may have their existing cancer cells hijacked by the virus, causing uncontrolled growth that fills the airways with a smoke-like buildup. People with high lactic acid levels from intense physical activity are likely predisposed to becoming hunters. The jockey mutation may stem from someone previously wheelchair-bound whose spinal cord was affected by the virus, with pre-existing or virus-induced dementia also potentially contributing to the hunched posture and erratic behavior. Excessive use of bodybuilding supplements like steroids or growth hormones likely interacts with the virus to cause the extreme uncontrolled muscle growth seen in tanks. Similar to the tank, the charger's distinctly asymmetrical build may result from a localized interaction with inflammation treatments applied to one side of the body. Abnormally high fat and cholesterol levels are converted by the virus into a massive bile-producing sac, explaining both the boomer's enormous size and its hollow torso. A pre-existing stomach bacterial infection or overproduction of stomach acid, hijacked by the virus, results in the spitter's corrosive acid mutation. A combination of a pre-existing mental condition and female hormones likely drives the witch mutation, with an extreme lack of body fat causing intense pain as the virus breaks it down, explaining the constant crying and volatile aggression. The green flu pandemic is estimated to have killed over 2 billion people worldwide, wiping out a significant portion of the human population within just a few months of the initial outbreak. E-Day. In the Gears of War universe, Emergence Day, otherwise known as E-Day, was a sudden, coordinated, planet-wide attack on Sera, a habitable world and home to all known human life, launched by the Locust Horde, a militarized race that had been living underground in a network of tunnels and caverns known as the Hollow. The attack came just 6 weeks after the conclusion of the Pendulum Wars, an 80-year global human conflict, leaving humanity exhausted and unprepared. The Locust burst through the ground simultaneously in nearly every major city via openings called emergence holes, wielding a combination of bioengineered creatures and stolen human weapons. Over a quarter of the human population was killed within the first 26 hours, with millions more missing. The Coalition of Ordered Governments, or COG, deployed its full military in response, but the Locust overwhelmed all organized resistance for more than a year, seizing weapons, vehicles, and resources along the way. The Locust's goal was to wipe out humanity entirely and claim the surface for themselves. They were driven to do so by a crisis unfolding beneath the ground, a parasitic infection called the lambent, caused by a substance known as emulsion, was spreading through the Hollow and threatening their survival. E-Day marked the start of the Locust War, with the war itself standing as the single deadliest event in human history on Sera, ultimately killing approximately 25 billion people, roughly 99.9% of the planet's human population, including several billion on E-Day alone. The 7-Hour War. In the Half-Life universe, an accident at Black Mesa, a secret underground research facility in New Mexico, tore open a dimensional rift. The side effects of this breach triggered violent, unpredictable storms across Earth that ripped temporary holes in space, flooding the world with hostile alien creatures from a dimension known as Zen. These creatures appeared across the globe without warning, launching an unrelenting assault on humanity. Desperate for safety, people abandoned rural areas and crowded into cities, But even concentrated defenses proved insufficient. Governments worldwide collapsed under the weight of the invasion, mass displacement, and total social breakdown, their resources entirely exhausted. Then, drawn to Earth by the dimensional rift opened during the Black Mesa accident, a vast interdimensional empire called the Combine arrived to invade the planet. The Combine is a colossal empire that had conquered and absorbed countless civilizations across multiple worlds and dimensions, incorporating their biology and technology along the way. With Earth's militaries already exhausted from the ongoing alien invasions, they had no chance. The Combine defeated every armed force on the planet in just 7 hours. In the chaos, Dr. Wallace Breen, the former administrator of Black Mesa, managed to make contact with the Combine. The United Nations, completely out of options, authorized him to negotiate by any means necessary. The deal Breen secured was effectively an unconditional surrender. Humanity handed Earth over to the Combine entirely. In exchange, the Combine allowed the human race to survive, but they were stripped of all freedoms and rights. As a reward, the Combine appointed Breen interim administrator of Earth, making him their human puppet ruler. Earth's militaries never stood a realistic chance in the 7-hour war, as they were already overwhelmed by the alien creatures invading before the Combine even arrived. The war was effectively lost before it began, and by its end, the vast majority of Earth's population was dead. The surviving population was herded into tightly controlled city centers, as the world outside had become extraordinarily dangerous. The alien creatures unleashed by the earlier dimensional storms had spread across the planet, turning the wilderness into a deadly wasteland hostile to humans, native wildlife, and even the Combine themselves. Inside the cities, facilities were used to capture humans, wipe their memories, and surgically and psychologically transform them into obedient soldiers and workers for the Empire. The Combine simultaneously stripped Earth of its natural resources, draining entire oceans of water and minerals and leaving behind barren landlocked coastlines. To prevent any human recovery, the Combine deployed a suppression field, a technological system that made human reproduction impossible, and it strongly implied they laced the city water supply with chemicals to keep the population docile and compliant, ensuring not just physical domination but psychological submission. Being that the majority of the human population was wiped out in the 7-hour war, the death toll of the event easily rests in the billions. The Cordyceps Outbreak. In The Last of Us universe, in the year 2013, a mutated strain of the Cordyceps fungus, which originated in South America and spread to humans through contaminated crops, began sweeping across the United States. By late September, hospitals in cities like Austin, Texas, were seeing a 300% surge in admissions, and the FDA was issuing massive food recalls in response. Within several months, roughly 60% of humanity had been either killed or turned into fungal-infected hosts by what would come to be medically known as the Cordyceps brain infection. The Cordyceps fungus would grow within a living host, progressing through 4 stages. In stage 1, within 2 days, the infected person would lose all higher brain function, becoming mindlessly violent. In 2 weeks, the fungus grows over the host's head and begins corrupting their vision, marking stage 2. After roughly a year, the host is left completely blind and scarred, but develops a primitive echolocation to navigate, completing stage 3. In rare cases, hosts who survive more than a decade reach stage 4, developing thick, hardened plates of fungal growth across their bodies. When the fungus eventually kills the host, the body sprouts fungal growths that release infectious spores into the air. The infection can also spread through bites from living hosts. Because the fungus is parasitic, it cannot infect a body after death. To protect against airborne spores, survivors wear gas masks. Airborne spores don't spread effectively in open environments, meaning the infection struggles to propagate outdoors, though infected individuals are often seen still roaming rural areas. The fungus thrives most in enclosed dark spaces like sewers, subway tunnels, and abandoned buildings. The infection isn't limited to humans either. Animals such as monkeys can carry and transmit it through bites, even without visibly transforming the way human hosts do. With a global population around 7.1 billion in 2013, somewhere between 4.2 and 4.6 billion people were killed or infected, wiping out roughly 60% of humanity. The Marvel Zombies Outbreak. Within the Marvel multiverse on Earth 2149, a superhero called Sentry arrived from another dimension, driven mad by a force called the Hunger, an overwhelming, uncontrollable craving for human flesh. He crash-landed and infected nearly every superhero on Earth, turning them into zombies. Unlike traditional zombies, they retained their intelligence, personalities, and superpowers, but were irresistibly driven by this insatiable hunger. When the Silver Surfer arrived to deliver a warning that his master Galactus was on his way to consume the Earth, the zombies attacked and devoured him. In doing so, a group of 7 zombie heroes, which included Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, and Hulk, absorbed a portion of his power cosmic, granting them an extreme level of power. Now supercharged, these 7 turned on the remaining zombies and slaughtered them to consume them, as they were the only flesh left available. When Galactus finally arrived, the zombies' scientific minds built a device to amplify their stolen cosmic powers, and together the group managed to wound the Devourer, though Captain America was killed by his arch-nemesis the Red Skull during the chaos. They then devoured Galactus, absorbing his near-limitless power and becoming a collective known as the Zombie Galacti. With their newfound power, the Zombie Galacti take their hunger into space. In total, the Hunger wiped out billions on Earth and continued killing billions more across the universe. The War of Wrath. In Middle-earth's first age, Morgoth, a godlike being who had turned to evil and became the original Dark Lord, had spent centuries waging war against elves and men. Eventually, his power was completely unchallenged as every elven kingdom had fallen and the last embers of resistance were snuffed out. With all hope seemingly gone, a half-elven mariner named Arundel made a desperate voyage across the sea to Valinor, a blessed realm beyond the world, and home to the Valar, angelic powers roughly equivalent to gods who had created and shaped the world but largely stayed out of its affairs. Upon meeting the Valar, he pleaded with them to intervene before Middle-earth was annihilated. The Valar answered the half-elves' pleas. They assembled the greatest army ever gathered of gods, spirits, elves, men, and dwarves and marched on Morgoth's fortress. Morgoth was caught completely unprepared. His armies of orcs, balrogs, corrupted men, and monstrous creatures fought back, leading to 40 years of war, and in the end the forces of Morgoth were ultimately destroyed. Morgoth was cast beyond the walls of the universe itself into an eternal void, ending both his reign and the entire First Age of Middle-earth. The War of Wrath was the deadliest war in the history of Middle-earth, with casualties numbering in the millions and so much destruction that an entire continent was swallowed by the sea. The Blood Wars. In the Forgotten Realms, popularly known as the Dungeons & Dragons universe, the Blood War was an ancient conflict fought between fiends, the evil beings that inhabited the lower planes, the dark regions of existence where evil held sway. The war's 2 main sides were the demons, creatures of pure chaos from a plane called the Abyss, and the devils, who represented lawful evil hailing from the realm known as the Nine Hells. A third group of fiends, the Yugoloths, beings of neutral evil, manipulated the conflict by playing both sides against one another. The war had been raging since the Age Before Ages, a dark era so early in history that the prime material plane, the world where mortals live, had not yet fully formed. The scale of the conflict was staggering, stretching across entire planes of reality and involving a nearly infinite number of fiends. Most of the Blood Wars fighting took place in Avernus, the first layer of the Nine Hells. Demonic forces would sail along the River Styx, a waterway connecting the evil planes, to invade Avernus. The fighting did not always stay contained there, however. Destructive skirmishes could break out anywhere in the multiverse where demons and devils were able to appear. The true origins of the Blood War remain uncertain, and different traditions offer competing explanations. Many believe it began as a lingering remnant of the ancient cosmic struggle between law and chaos. The Yugoloths claimed the war was their own experiment into the nature of evil itself. In the Blood War, the Devils of the Nine Hells saw themselves as the multiverse's necessary defense against total destruction, believing that all of existence depended on their ability to contain the Abyss. At the same time, they exploited the conflict for their own gain, harvesting souls, storing them in objects called soul coins, and using them to fuel infernal war machines. Demon lords treated the war as a useful distraction that let them pursue their own schemes and rivalries, while lesser demons and fiends embraced the endless violence as a cure for immortal boredom. Meanwhile, the Yugoloths profited immensely as mercenaries who shifted between sides, gaining wealth, power, and influence from the constant demand for their services. As the war dragged on for millennia, both sides recruited mortals directly from the material plane, the world of the living, and created new fiendish bloodlines, including Cambions, Alufiends, and Tieflings, beings born of unions between fiends and mortals. The demons held overwhelming numbers and raw individual power, but their chaotic nature and constant infighting kept them from ever fully defeating the devils. The devils, though far fewer, relied on discipline, strict hierarchy, and ruthless strategy to hold the line. The war permanently scarred the plains where it was fought. Once beautiful places like Avernus were reduced to ruined wastelands of fire, stone, and desolation, while battlefields in the Abyss became littered with shattered outposts and monstrous growths such as viper trees. Despite all of this devastation, many scholars argued that the war was actually the best possible outcome, for as long as the two sides remained consumed with destroying each other, neither could fully conquer the lower planes and turn its united strength against everything else in existence, despite an endless and ongoing death toll that ranges across several eons. Buster Machine 3. In the Gunbuster universe, Buster Machine 3, also called the Black Hole Bomb, was humanity's ultimate weapon against the space monsters, a race of extraterrestrials ranging from giant insectoid creatures to living alien motherships. Built to destroy the space monster's command brain, it worked by compressing the planet Jupiter to roughly 1/30,000th of its size, and triggering a chain reaction that created a black hole. When activated, Buster Machine 3 failed to detonate because 2% of its generators had been damaged in a prior battle. To manually trigger the reaction, pilots Noriko Takaya and Kazumi Amano entered the bomb in their mech, Gunbuster, and tore out one of its degeneracy engines to ignite it, an act that left them stranded alone in space for 12,000 years. The resulting explosion obliterated everything within a 10,000 light-year radius, and the bomb's remains collapsed into a new supermassive black hole designated Tannhauser 1. The blast wiped out nearly the entire space monster species, but also destroyed a massive portion of the Earth fleet defending it. No official death toll is given, but the scale of the weapon puts the number somewhere between several billion and potentially trillions of lives. The End Times. In the setting of Warhammer Fantasy, the End Times was the long-prophesied apocalypse that finally arrived to destroy the known world over the years 2519 to 2528 by the Imperial calendar. Its arrival was announced by the appearance of the twin-tailed comet, a celestial sign regarded as an omen of destruction. The comet's coming marked the crowning of Archaon, the 13th and final ever chosen, the supreme mortal champion chosen to lead the forces of Chaos Undivided, the united worship of all the dark gods. As the world suffered through its slow, agonizing death, its mortal races fought desperately to the very end against the darkness threatening to consume everything. In the west, in the cold land of Nagaroth, worshippers of Khorne, the chaos god of blood and slaughter, marched south under black banners. The Dark Elves who lived there rallied their armies and held the line against the frenzied invaders at their gates, but despite all their pride and splendor, they were doomed to fail because their king, Malekith, abandoned them to pursue his rightful inheritance as Phoenix King, ruler of the island nation of Ulthuan and its High Elves. However, on Ulthuan, a mist of terrible power swept across the homeland of the High Elves, conjuring demons and other vile creatures from the depths of chaos. With their beloved Everqueen, their spiritual ruler and life-giving heart of the people, gone, and their proud Phoenix King dead, a young prince named Tyrion rose to lead the High Elves through this time of conflict. But his rise set in motion a chain of events that tore the mighty kingdom apart forever. Farther to the southwest in the distant jungles of Lustria in the New World, the vast empire of the Lizardmen saw a deadly conflict reignited after centuries of peace. The Skaven, a race of vicious rat men who dwell beneath the earth, surged up from underground once more, led by Clan Pestilence, their plague-worshipping faction. Every one of the Lizardmen's temple cities was drawn into one final apocalyptic war that ended in annihilation. In the east, the approach of the world's end stirred the Greenskins, the brutish race of orcs and goblins, into a frenzy. The Greenskins had always thrived on war, fighting among themselves as eagerly as against any other enemy, but a sudden urge gripped their simple, savage minds as they sensed something big brewing in the north. The infighting that had plagued their long, brutal history vanished, replaced by an overwhelming drive to unite under a single banner. The Dwarves, stout allies of the Empire, the great human nation founded by the warrior god Sigmar, watched volcanic fires erupt from the Mountains of Morn, prompting a military mobilization on a scale not seen since the Great Catastrophe, the ancient disaster that first brought chaos into the world. But it was upon the human realms of the old world that the fate of the world truly rested. As the world drew its final dying breath, refugees flowed by the tens of thousands toward the Empire, the last bastion of defiance against the doom threatening to destroy them all. To the north, in the land of Kislev, stood the Auric Bastion, the greatest magical wall ever created. This colossal wall was the only thing holding back the darkness, and when it finally fell, the last battle for the entire world began. To the victors would go the ultimate prize: dominion over the known world. In the end, despite the valiant efforts of its inhabitants, the mortal world was doomed, meaning the death toll of this grand conflict was nothing short of every living being in the setting of Warhammer fantasy. Yet, from the ashes of the old, a new world emerged out of the darkness left behind in the void, following a cycle of creation and destruction that had been long in the making. The Butlerian Jihad. In the universe of Dune, the Butlerian Jihad, also called the Great Revolt, was a nearly century-long crusade against computers, thinking machines, and conscious robots. It began as a response to the creeping dominance of technology over human life. As mankind spread across the universe, machines eventually advanced to the point of making decisions on behalf of people. This handed enormous power to the engineers and creators of those machines, who rose to form a technocratic ruling class effectively controlling the lives of ordinary people. Humanity eventually rose up against the machines and their creators in a zealous holy war, fighting to reclaim the human soul from the cold logic of machine gods. After 2 generations of violence, even the old religions of the time came to be viewed with suspicion, seen as tools of fear and control, which led to the technological uprising. Religious leaders, tentatively at first, began meeting across factional lines to share beliefs, and out of those exchanges came a new central commandment that would define the era: no machine may ever be made in the likeness of the human mind. The Jihad ended with the complete destruction of every intelligent machine humanity had ever built, and the consequences of this reshaped civilization permanently. Technology across all human worlds was rolled back dramatically, and new empires rose from the wreckage with a profoundly different relationship to science and progress. The prohibition against thinking technology was entire, as even basic computers and calculators were banned, and the penalty for building or owning such technology was swift execution. The Jihad also sparked a renewed and deepened belief in the spiritual sanctity of human life. The casualties of the conflict were never concisely calculated, but estimates placed the death toll somewhere within the tens of billions. The Wildfire Virus. In the universe of the Walking Dead television series, the wildfire virus is a viral disease that brings its host back from death as a living means of spreading the infection, and drives it to attack anything alive so the disease can pass on. The virus first spreads through the air, turning people into asymptomatic carriers. Once an infected person dies, wildfire reactivates the hindbrain and reanimates the corpse as a zombie, an aggressive carrier of the disease. These zombies try to devour any living thing they encounter, and through their bites, scratches, and other contact, they pass along an active form of the virus. This active form triggers a separate second infection where the body's immune response spirals out of control into a flood of inflammatory signals that overwhelms the body, leading to organ failure and death within 48 hours. There is no known cure for wildfire's ability to bring the dead back, and the only sure way to stop reanimation is to destroy the brain after death. The wildfire virus is thought to have begun as a man-made laboratory infection in France, likely meant to serve as a viral vector, a method for delivering genetic material into cells, before it mutated into its deadly form. After the CDC identified its first known case on April 16th of 2010, reports stayed limited until August, when reanimations and attacks grew widespread enough for the CDC and WHO to declare a pandemic on August 25th. Because nearly every ordinary death now ended in reanimation unless the brain was destroyed, the global death rate exploded as zombies killed people directly or infected them, while governments, media outlets, and civilians responded too slowly or brushed the crisis off as overblown. On August 27th of 2010, Monument Day marked worldwide societal collapse as panic buying, riots, mass evacuations, overwhelmed hospitals, failed emergency services, grounded flights, power outages, and crumbling infrastructure threw the planet into chaos. Militaries tried to restore order, but operations like the United States' Operation Cobalt turned brutal and unstable, with soldiers ordered to execute civilians outside safe zones, leading to desertion, infighting, a second American Civil War, and eventually the napalming of major cities, all of which ended the modern era of civilization. All told, the wildfire virus directly and indirectly killed billions of people, wiping out an estimated 95 to 99% of the global population. The Simian Flu. In the Planet of the Apes universe, the Simian Flu began as ALZ-112, an experimental retrovirus developed by geneticist Dr. Will Rodman at Genesis Laboratories to cure Alzheimer's disease. Testing on chimpanzees showed dramatic results, notably in a chimp called Bright Eyes, who displayed the enhanced intelligence Rodman had hoped for. But when Bright Eyes was killed by security guards after becoming protective of her newborn infant Caesar, funding for the project was cut. Rodman secretly kept samples of ALZ-112 and administered them to his father Charles, who suffered from Alzheimer's. Charles improved at first, but his body eventually built up antibodies against the virus and his Alzheimer's relapsed. Meanwhile, Caesar, who had inherited his mother's heightened intelligence, was taken in and raised by Rodman. Determined to create a strain that could overcome the antibody problem, Rodman disclosed his unauthorized experiments to Genesis director Stephen Jacobs, who approved the development of a stronger version named ALZ-113. The second strain would ultimately prove to be lethal to humans. During the first ALZ-113 trial, a bonobo test subject named Koba broke free of his restraints, ruptured a viral container, and knocked the breathing mask off of handler Robert Franklin, exposing him to the virus, and ALZ-113 would end up killing Franklin. Before dying, Franklin sneezed on an airline pilot, setting off a chain of infections that would grow into a global pandemic known as the Simian Flu. In apes, ALZ-113 enabled the brain to replicate and repair its own cells, producing heightened intelligence. In humans, the immune system was too weak to survive it. The symptoms in humans would resemble Ebola, leading to a hemorrhagic fever, beginning with persistent nosebleeds before progressing to bleeding from the eyes, ears, and mouth, and ending in death. Humans who survived the pandemic did so because of a natural genetic immunity. After the initial pandemic, the Simian Flu mutated into a new strain. Rather than killing its host, the mutated virus attacked the brain's speech center, stripping the infected of language and reducing them to primal instincts. Even those who had been immune to the original strain were vulnerable to the new version. The original pandemic killed approximately 99% of the human population, a death toll running into the billions, and the mutation ensured that what remained of humanity faced a devastating fate of de-evolution. The destruction of Taurus. In the Star Wars Legends timeline, in the era of the Old Republic during the Jedi Civil War, Darth Malak dispatched his fleet to the Outer Rim planet Taurus with a single objective of capturing Jedi Bastila Shan. Shan possessed a rare ability called Battle Meditation, a force power that could simultaneously strengthen the resolve of allied troops and sap the will of enemies, and her use of it had been invaluable to the Republic War up to that point. Malak's forces ambushed her ship, the Endar Spire, above Taurus, and Sith troops under Darth Malak's apprentice Darth Bandon boarded it to seize her alive. However, Sean escaped along with Republic Commander Carth Onasi and Revan, a former Sith Lord whose memories had been wiped, before the ship was destroyed. Malak responded by placing Taurus under martial law to hunt them down. The search was complicated when Sean's escape pod crashed in Taurus's Undercity, where she was captured by a criminal swoop gang called the Black Vulkars before Malak's forces could reach her. With help from a rival gang called the Hidden Becks, Revan tracked down and freed Sean. A Mandalorian mercenary named Canderous Ordo then offered Revan a way off the blockaded planet by stealing the Ebon Hawk, a freighter belonging to a powerful crime lord named Davik Kang. At the same time, Malak, growing impatient with the search, ordered Admiral Saul Kareth to begin a full orbital bombardment of the planet's surface, choosing to destroy Taurus entirely rather than continue hunting for Sean. Revan and Ordo reached the Ebon Hawk but were confronted by Kang and a bounty hunter named Calo Nord as the bombardment began. In the ensuing firefight, Kang was killed and Nord was left incapacitated. Revan's group boarded the Ebon Hawk and launched into orbit, fought through a wave of Sith fighters, and escaped into hyperspace. Behind them, the bombardment continued until Taurus was nearly stripped of all life, killing billions. Taurus was largely rebuilt by 3 ABY and had returned to prominence as a major city world by 40 ABY, but the wounds left by Malak's bombardment never truly disappeared. The War of the Beast. In the universe of Warhammer 40,000, the War of the Beast was an enormous invasion launched by the Orcs, a brutal warlike alien species, that threatened Terra, the homeworld of humanity and the capital of the human Imperium, in the middle of the 32nd millennium. The invasion ended a prosperous era of Imperial history known as the Time of Rebirth, and it was commanded by a mysterious Orc war boss known only as the Beast. Beginning in the year 31544, the Orcs of the Horde rampaged across the Imperium on a massive scale, their attacks growing in number until the invasion became the greatest the galaxy had ever seen from the Greenskins. It surpassed even the Orc Empire, defeated on the world of Olenor by Horus, the genetically engineered demigod leader of the Luna Wolf Space Marine Legion during the Great Crusade, a victory so significant it earned Horus the title of War Master. Driven by their primal desire to conquer the galaxy, the War of the Beast became the largest conflict the Imperium had fought since the Horus Heresy, the catastrophic civil war that had nearly destroyed it. The Orcs' widespread advance was finally stopped after 2 years, when the Imperium invaded the Orc homeworld of Olenor Prime to eliminate the Beast directly. The Greenskin assault swallowed planets, subsectors, and entire sectors across the Segmentum Solar, the region of space surrounding Terra itself, killing untold billions upon billions of humans, with an equally devastating casualty total for the invading Orcs. The destruction of Earth. In the universe of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Earth was a giant supercomputer designed to discover the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. The design came from Deep Thought, a supercomputer built by a race of hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings to calculate the answer to the ultimate question, and the construction was carried out by the Magrathians, the inhabitants of the planet Magrathea. Earth's work, however, was never completed, as a psychiatrist named Gag Halfront realized that if the ultimate question was ever found, the psychiatric profession would lose its vast, bewildered, and highly profitable clientele. To prevent this, he arranged for the Vogons, an alien race from the planet Vogsphere, who serve as the galactic government's bureaucrats, to destroy the supercomputer, using the construction of a hyperspace bypass as the official excuse. The Vogons demolished Earth just 5 minutes before the question was due to be announced, wiping out 10 million years of work in the process. Only 2 humans survived Earth's destruction, Arthur Dent and Trillian, while over 6.4 billion humans perished in its destruction. The Fall of Reach. In the Halo universe, the Fall of Reach was one of the largest and deadliest battles of the Human Covenant War. From July 25th to August 30th of 2552, humanity's military, the United Nations Space Command, or UNSC, fought the invaders at Reach, a colony in the Epsilon Eridani system. The Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, had calculated an 87% chance the Covenant would find the system within 5 months and considered using Reach as bait for Operation Red Flag, a plan for the Spartan IIs, humanity's elite augmented super soldiers, to capture a major Covenant ship and one of the High Prophets who led the Covenant in order to end the war. ONI's prediction came true. A Covenant commander recovered a Luminary, an ancient device that detects relics of the vanished Forerunner civilization, revealing Reach's location and significance to humanity. On July 23rd, his fleet arrived, quietly landing troops in the Vieri territory, while elite warriors called Zealots disabled a local relay communications hub. ONI first blamed insurrectionists, human rebels fighting the UNSC, but on July 24th, Noble Team, a squad of Spartan super soldiers, confirmed the truth, triggering Winter Contingency, the alert marking the invasion's start. The Covenant built a hidden foothold in Vieri on July 26 and attacked Sword Base, an installation holding ONI's secrets and Forerunner information. Noble Team restored the base's defenses, and their retreating corvette, one of the Covenant's concealed warships, was destroyed by a max strike from an orbiting warship's magnetic accelerator cannon. As the assault escalated over the coming weeks, the UNSC responded with a two-part plan: Operation Left Jab to stretch the Covenant fleet thin, and Operation Uppercut to target a Covenant supercarrier with a makeshift bomb built from a slipspace drive. Noble Team's Noble 6 and George carried the bomb aboard the captured corvette Ardent Prayer, and George sacrificed himself to detonate it manually, destroying the Long Night of Solace supercarrier. However, the Ministry of Resolution's far larger Covenant fleet then arrived over Reach. With the larger fleet now in orbit, the invasion soon became planetary devastation as Covenant ships began glassing the surface by bombarding it with plasma. The city of New Alexandria endured a siege from August 18th to August 23rd, in which evacuation transports were destroyed and Covenant stormed the city. Noble Team cleared evacuation zones, but the city was glassed, and Noble Team's Catherine was killed by sniper fire. Millions died elsewhere as HICOM, the UNSC's High Command, withheld counteroffensives to preserve hope for the Operation Red Flag. Noble Team was then sent to destroy Sword Base, but instead found Dr. Halsey in a Forerunner complex. She then entrusted Noble 6, Carter, and Emil with delivering a fragment of the artificial intelligence Cortana to the warship Pillar of Autumn. On August 30th, a Covenant armada of 315 ships arrived on Reach. Covenant forces overwhelmed the human defense and destroyed generators powering orbital guns and continued glassing the planet. Meanwhile, Spartans John 117, James 005, and Linda 058 destroyed navigation data aboard the UNSC Circumference, preventing a breach of the Cole Protocol, the rule that no data revealing Earth's location may fall into Covenant hands. However, James was lost in the mission, and Linda was left clinically dead. The Pillar of Autumn then went to a shipyard to await Noble Team and Cortana. Team leader Carter sacrificed himself to destroy a Scarab, a massive Covenant walking war machine that blocked their path, and Emil eventually manned a mass driver, a huge magnetic cannon, while Noble 6 cleared a landing platform for Captain Jacob Keyes to retrieve Cortana's fragment. When Zealots killed Emil, 6 took over the gun and crippled an attacking battlecruiser by destroying its exposed glassing port, and the Autumn escaped into slipspace. Left behind, Noble 6 fought alone until he was killed by Sangheili warriors. The Battle of Reach left both sides devastated, with hundreds of millions dead and hundreds of ships destroyed or crippled. Reach was glassed so severely that the damage was clearly visible from orbit, and the planet would not turn green again until the year 2589. Deceased. On Earth 55, in the DC multiverse, shortly after the Justice League had battled Darkseid, Batman discovered that the hero Cyborg had gone missing, secretly abducted by Darkseid, who believes Cyborg held the key to the anti-life equation, a cosmic formula capable of dominating free will. It was soon revealed that half the equation in fact existed inside Cyborg, and Darkseid combined it with the half he already possessed while injecting Cyborg with a fragment of the Black Racer, an embodiment of death itself. But the fusion went terribly wrong. The equation mutated into a technological plague that began corrupting everything it touched, including Darkseid, turning the infected into zombie-like creatures. Cyborg escaped to Metropolis through a boom tube, a form of instant teleportation, but the virus immediately began spreading and was able to spread through phones and screens, infecting anyone who looked at them, which plunged the city into chaos. Superman raced to protect his wife Lois, his son John, and Damian Wayne, Batman's son, by destroying their devices before they could be exposed. Meanwhile, Batman severed Wayne Manor's systems with an electromagnetic pulse, but the crisis still reached him. Infected members of the Bat family attacked him and Alfred, and Batman himself was bitten by Tim Drake and wounded by Nightwing. Aquaman was dragged beneath the Atlantic by an infected ship crew, and Hal Jordan became infected through his phone. Black Canary was forced to kill him with her canary cry, and Hal's ring then chose her as the new Green Lantern responsible for Earth's sector of space, a responsibility Superman insisted she accept since the world needed her. Many survivors were eventually able to gather at the Daily Planet and reach Batman, who revealed that the infected had become anti-living and confessed that he was infected. He was wearing the cold-generating suit of the villain Mr. Freeze to slow the virus, while Alfred stood by with a shotgun. Batman explained that saving the world would mean destroying both advanced technology and the infected themselves, but before he could deliver a final message to his son Damian, he fully turned, forcing Alfred to end the transmission and kill Bruce Wayne. Alfred left Wayne Manor in the Batwing to deliver a briefcase to Damian, as elsewhere, Harley Quinn killed the infected Joker with a shotgun, and celebrated finally being rid of him, only to be confronted by the infected Birds of Prey. Superman then cleared the Daily Planet of infected so the survivors could use its communication systems, asking Green Arrow and Green Lantern Dinah to protect Lois and John while he checked on Smallville, the town where he was raised. Meanwhile, Atlantis fell when infected blood contaminated the water, and Aquaman, now anti-living, attacked his wife Mara and his protege Garth, infecting Garth before Mara escaped. On his way to Smallville, Superman saved people where he could, including the hero Black Lightning and his family, before reaching the Kent family farm. There he found his mother Martha alive, but his father Jonathan had been infected and trapped in the barn, forcing Superman to take Martha and flee. Superman returned with Martha and grieved Jonathan's fate before Lois began broadcasting from the Daily Planets, calling on anyone with powers, hero or villain, to gather there for humanity's survival. The message even reached Themyscira, where Mara had found refuge and Wonder Woman prepared to join the fight. Superman and Lantern Dinah located Flash and Kid Flash hiding in Keystone City under Batman's orders, since an infected speedster could doom the world. In Gotham, Harley Quinn was saved from the infected Birds of Prey by Poison Ivy, who killed them with her plant powers. Back in Metropolis, Alfred arrived in the Batwing and then gave Damian Bruce's final gift, a Batsuit. Moments later, Hawkgirl crashed down with a warning that Captain Atom had been turned and was about to explode, prompting Superman and Wonder Woman to fly to Washington, grab him, and carry him into the sky just before he detonated. Superman and Wonder Woman survived Captain Atom's massive explosion, but believed Metropolis and their loved ones had been destroyed, but Dinah had been able to protect part of the Daily Planet with her Green Lantern ring. Then, Lex Luthor and his sister Lena, having both survived the zombie infestation, found and made peace with Superman, helping the hero spend the next few days destroying internet servers worldwide, while Themyscira was expanded into a refuge for survivors. Damian, now the new Batman, traveled with Green Arrow and Dinah to Gotham, where Poison Ivy had turned the city into a plant-covered sanctuary, and after some convincing from Harley, Ivy agreed to shelter survivors there. In the Arctic, Superman transformed the Fortress of Solitude into a new Hall of Heroes and command center, where Cyborg and the others began building arcs to evacuate humanity from the planet. The hero's fragile progress was shattered when an infected Martian manhunter infiltrated the fortress, killing and infecting several people, including Lex and Flash, before the nuclear-powered hero Firestorm destroyed him. Flash escaped and spread the infection across the globe, forcing Superman to chase him down, but when he collided with Barry, pieces of the infected speedster merged into his body and infected him. In his final moments, Superman said goodbye to Lois, Martha, and John and flew into the atmosphere hoping to stop himself, but the virus overtook him before he could die. The infected Superman unleashed devastation on Earth, forcing the remaining heroes to activate Batman's contingency plan and forge a Sword of Athena laced with kryptonite for Wonder Woman to wield against him. Damian, Green Arrow, Dinah, and the other survivors loaded the arcs in Gotham and Themyscira, but Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn chose to remain behind. Aquaman, his Atlantean subjects, and the sea monster Kraken then attacked the Amazons mid-evacuation. In New York, Dinah used her ring to amplify her canary cry and stun Superman long enough for Wonder Woman to wound him, but Superman impaled her in return, infecting her. John Kent flew out to confront his father, where Dinah arrived with the Sword of Athena and was joined by the Green Lantern Corps, and realizing he couldn't win, Superman retreated into the sun, aiming to completely absorb it. John Kent and several other heroes were carried to safety by the Green Lanterns, as they admitted that there was no way to stop Superman. Even so, the Guardians of the Universe reasoned that sacrificing the planet would at least bring an end to the anti-life virus. Back on Earth, Cyborg discovered that the cure to the virus existed within him, but before he could reach the arcs, the infected Wonder Woman beheaded him and sent his body into a chasm, seemingly destroying humanity's last hope. With Earth lost, the surviving refugees escaped aboard the arcs and arrived at a new world, which they named Earth 2. The Genosha Massacre. In the Marvel Universe, Genosha, officially the Republic of Genosha, is a small island covering around 1,200 square miles, located northeast of Madagascar. At one point, Magneto officially took control of Genosha with the support of the United Nations, transforming it into what he claimed was a mutant haven. At its height, Genosha was home to nearly the entire mutant population of Earth. Meanwhile, in Ecuador, the United States was funding a facility developing wild sentinels, evolving self-sustaining versions of the giant mutant hunting robots known as Sentinels. This facility was eventually uncovered by Cassandra Nova, the twin sister of Charles Xavier. While the two had shared a womb, Xavier recognized her evil presence and killed her, resulting in her stillbirth, but the entity that became Cassandra was telepathically entangled with Xavier, which granted her psionic powers of her own, including the ability to exit the womb and create a body for herself. As Xavier's ideological dark shadow, she sought revenge on him and was bent on destruction and genocide. Cassandra Nova used Donald Trask, nephew of Bolivar Trask, to gain control of the Wild Sentinels and unleash them on Genosha, where the mutant population was slaughtered in the worst act of genocide in mutant history. Of the world's 17.5 million mutants, 16.5 lost their lives in the massacre, reducing Earth's mutant population by over 94%. The Act of Ultimate Heresy. In the universe of Trench Crusade, when the armies of the Church captured the Holy City during the First Crusade, the Knights Templar discovered secret vaults beneath the most holy of temples, and within them an ancient demonic artifact. Seeking the unholy wisdom of which the artifact spoke, the Templars began trafficking with devils and committing all manner of unspeakable rites. This betrayal became known as the First Heresy. The Church's armies retreated, and Jerusalem became a depraved pit where hell and the mortal plane now bled into one another. For 8 centuries since, the Church waged a crusade against hell and to take back the Holy City. The landscape was utterly devastated, crisscrossed with thousands of miles of mud, trenches, and craters. The crusade in the modern era is fought by armies wielding terrifying weaponry, and both sides conjure supernatural beings of such immense power that they are nigh unstoppable. The war that followed the Act of Ultimate Heresy would kill hundreds of millions, if not billions, over the coming centuries. The Quiet Rapture. In the Iron Lung universe, the Quiet Rapture was a mysterious cosmic event in which every known star and planet in the universe with sentient life, flora, fauna, a habitable atmosphere, or natural resources, including Earth and Mars, suddenly vanished. It occurred in 2349 AD, leaving behind only uninhabitable moons, asteroids, and humanity's space stations and starships. No known visual contact was made with any planet at the time of the event, and the death toll was effectively the entire population of the universe, barring a few pockets of survivors. After the disaster, natural resources obviously began to dwindle, prompting the survivors of humanity to search the leftover moons for what they could. This led to the formation of a faction called the Consolidation of Iron, or COI, and the scarcity of resources sparked conflict between the COI and Ideon, the largest remaining man-made space station, culminating in a 9-day battle on Filament Station in 2354 AD. Many theories have been proposed to explain the disaster, including religious interpretations of the event as a literal rapture, some unknown quantum anomaly, or something more cosmic and sinister. There are still no concrete answers. The invasion of Super Earth. In the Helldivers universe, during the Second Galactic War, the Illuminate, an alien force long thought eradicated after the events of the First Galactic War, re-emerged through an anomaly known as the Meridian Black Hole. They were a massive fleet known as the Great Host, and Super Earth High Command judged that the outer worlds of New Haven, Pylon 5, and Widow's Harbor could not stop the assault, only delay it long enough for Super Earth's megacities to prepare. Those worlds fell, Mars was devastated, and the Illuminate soon reached Super Earth itself, beginning the event known as the invasion of Super Earth. The objective for the Helldivers, humanity's elite soldiers, was to hold Super Earth's 7 megacities, including the federal capital, Prosperity City. If all 7 fell, Super Earth would be lost. The first phase opened with an assault on Eagleopolis, followed by attacks on the cities of Remembrance and Equality on Sea. Eagleopolis became the first megacity to fall, but by the end of the initial phase, the defenders had reduced the Illuminate's fleet strength to 60%. Remembrance soon fell as well, and High Command resorted to extreme defensive measures, including converting Rainforest into tactical airstrips to provide planet-wide support from Eagle aircraft. York Supreme and Port Mercy then came under attack, and both eventually fell. With supplies strained, the Illuminate concentrated their forces on Prosperity City and Equality on Sea. During the siege of Prosperity City, the president of Super Earth was killed in action while defending the presidential security bunker, and the Illuminate, by then reduced to roughly 10% of their original fleet strength, launched a last desperate assault on Prosperity City. But the combined defense of Prosperity and Equality on Sea finally broke the invasion, and the surviving Illuminate forces retreated from Super Earth battle space. The cost was more than 120 million Helldivers, alongside millions of personnel from Super Earth armed forces. 7 billion Illuminate were killed, as well as potentially billions of human civilians, making the battle one of the deadliest known engagements of the Second Galactic War. What other lore videos would you like to see? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to the next video with all of you.